Issue 238 of Amazing Spider-Man features a common crook on the run from Spider-Man, who loses the hero in some sewer tunnels. By chance, he comes across an old hideout of Spider-Man's late enemy, the Green Goblin. The criminal opts to sell the information and access to the gear and journals of Norman Osborn's Green Goblin to a mystery buyer. The mystery buyer even kills this common crook to cover his tracks. Stern was dedicated to keeping the true identity of Hobgoblin a mystery, with his goal being to keep it a secret for 26 issues, one longer than the Stan Lee original Green Goblin mystery. Stern never got to see that to completion. However, he did tell some great stories with this new adversary, and while he may have modified Green Goblin's gear, this enemy was very different. Green Goblin had been driven mad by his goblin serum. The Hobgoblin was very much sane, more calculating and careful, and Stern knew who was behind the mask. Issue 239 features the first confrontation between Hobgoblin and Spider-Man. Hobgoblin had been raiding more of Osborn's storehouses for gear and supplies, maybe journals, which attract Spider-Man's attention, and they come to blows. Hobgoblin has upgraded the technology he has at hand, but Spider-Man still gets the upper hand. As Spider-Man moves to unmask him, we hear Hobgoblin think about how he must not be unmasked, for the disgrace would be too great. This panel, along with a page of the mysterious man behind the mask shown to the reader only in silhouette, piqued readers' interest. Hobgoblin wisely retreats from battle, realizing he is exhausted, and there must have been more to Green Goblin than just the technology in order to physically go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man. Hobgoblin returned in issues 244 and 245. More of Osborn's company warehouses are being robbed, and Spider-Man tracks the robbers down and begins fighting them. However, a man in black uses a pumpkin bomb to start a fire and attacks Spider-Man with Hobgoblin's new razor bats before driving away in a truck. Spider-Man stays behind to save the criminals from the fire. The man in black shows up at a motel where Hobgoblin is recovering. The man in black was merely one of Hobgoblin's minions, Lefty Donovan, and the men who had been used as robbers were used as a distraction so that Lefty could steal chemicals. The following issue is the first of 3 covers to promise to unmask the Hobgoblin. Marvel teased the readers with this a lot, but it worked. The second of this 2-parter story shows a mystery man mixing the chemicals obtained in the previous issue, putting together the Goblin serum from Osborn's old journals. They explode in his face, and a second man drags him out of the house, which is caught on fire. The house then explodes with the second man inside. The mystery man lies in a hospital bandaged for weeks. Meanwhile, Peter Parker sorts out his life and commits to being a freelance photographer full-time, planning to continue his graduate studies in the future. His friends and co-workers Betty and Ned Leeds warn him that his new path may be tougher than he thinks. The man in the hospital awakens and escapes, suiting up as the Hobgoblin. He flies to Times Square and begins to cause chaos. Spider-Man shows up and has a much tougher time because Hobgoblin now has super strength. Still, Spider-Man subdues and unmasks the Hobgoblin, only to realize it's minor criminal Lefty Donovan. Before Spider-Man can learn more, Donovan's Hobgoblin gear explodes, killing him. In a coda to the issue, we see that the real Hobgoblin was monitoring everything to see how the Goblin serum would affect someone. He's not prepared to take it himself until it's refined to keep him sane. His plot had the added bonus of making it seem that the Hobgoblin is dead. Stern's final Hobgoblin arc took place in issues 249 through 251. In these issues, wealthy men are summoned to an exclusive club by a mysterious man blackmailing them. Among those summoned are Peter's best friend Harry Osborn, boss J. Jonah Jameson, and fashion mogul Roderick Kingsley. Also showing up uninvited is Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime in New York. Hobgoblin appears and threatens to uncover the men's secrets unless they pay him a modest recurring fee. But when Harry lashes out at Hobgoblin, it's revealed that the man they've all been talking to was just a simple animatronic. The real Hobgoblin crashes in to take over, but Spider-Man is right behind him and they fight. This time, the Hobgoblin wins the fight and is about to kill Spider-Man, but he is saved from a killing blow by Kingpin of all people. Hobgoblin escapes because he doesn't want to confront Kingpin and his men. Kingpin tells Spider-Man that he does not want to deal with Hobgoblin and placed one of Spider-Man's tracers on Hobgoblin. It allows Spider-Man to track down the Hobgoblin and they continue their battle. In the fight, Norman Osborn's journals are burnt up to Hobgoblin's fear and rage. With nothing of value left at his hideout, the Hobgoblin escapes in a tricked-out van, battling Spidey until they crash off a dock into the river. Spider-Man escapes the sinking vehicle and it explodes, with Spidey finding Hobgoblin's mask, but no body. These 3 Hobgoblin story arcs were all that Roger Stern wrote for the character in Amazing Spider-Man, however. He was planning to eventually reveal who was behind Hobgoblin's mask, but he ended up quitting the title because he didn't get along with his new editor. Originally, Roger Stern was getting along very well with his editor, Tom DeFalco. However, Danny Fingeroth was placed as the new editor on the Spider-Man titles, and the two just butted heads. Roger Stern decided to quit before he could reveal who was behind Hobgoblin's mask. Stern built up not just the mystery behind Hobgoblin, but his menace. Hobgoblin got a clean win in a fight against Spider-Man in his last appearance by Stern, and before that showed that he was more than willing to use and sacrifice henchmen to lower the risk to himself. Stern's plan was to reveal that the Hobgoblin was Roderick Kingsley. However, he hadn't laid too much of the groundwork before he left. One small example of his plan is a fleeting mention in issue 250 where Kingsley wonders where his brother was. Stern intended for Roderick to have a look-alike brother, though not a twin, that he would use as a double for him when he appeared as the Hobgoblin. Stern explained his idea saying, quote, Roderick was a manipulator, a totally amoral businessman who used people and then tossed them to the side. As I was scripting Amazing Spider-Man number 238, I realized that the voice I was developing for the man who was about to become the Hobgoblin was the same as Kingsley's voice. That was when I realized that he was my ideal choice, end quote. But what Stern hadn't counted on was butting heads with editor Danny Fingeroth. Stern spoke about it, saying, quote, as far as Spider-Man was concerned, Tom and I were absolutely on the same wavelength. When he left, it just wasn't the same without him. I didn't have to explain every little detail to Tom the way I did with Danny. I could see that if we kept working together, it would drive at least one of us crazy, maybe both of us. After about 6 months, I called John Romita Jr. to discuss it with him, and he said he was thinking of leaving Amazing to spend more time on the X-Men, and that made it easier to leave the book, end quote. And so Danny Fingeroth placed Tom DeFalco, previously an editor for Amazing Spider-Man, on the book as the new writer. Tom DeFalco knew what Roger Stern's plan was for revealing Roderick Kingsley behind the Hobgoblin, but he didn't really like that idea. He didn't like the idea of an identical brother that wasn't even a twin, and he had his own plan that he began to lay out for who would be behind the Hobgoblin's mask. DeFalco's writing on Spider-Man focused on street crime, using villains like Kingpin, Hammerhead, and a new player, the Rose. The Rose and Hobgoblin team up for much of DeFalco's run, working to take down the other players in organized crime. The Rose wore a simple purple mask. Editor Tom Brevoort wrote about DeFalco's plans for the Rose, saying, quote, Tom basically said that he had conceived the Rose to be essentially a middle management crime figure because he thought there'd have to be characters like that. And when he started writing him, he didn't have any particular secret identity. It wasn't a mystery he was deliberately building. But then, when the readers grabbed onto it in the ripple effect of the Hobgoblin identity mystery, Tom says that he decided he needed to make the Rose some known character, and he settled on Roderick Kingsley, who was in the series at the time. But the Rose's identity didn't get revealed until Tom was off the book, so it wound up being somebody else, end quote. Ironically, DeFalco planned to reveal the Hobgoblin as Richard Fisk, the son of the Kingpin. But later, when the next writer on Spider-Man revealed who the Rose was, it was he who was Richard Fisk. The Hobgoblin's identity still hadn't been revealed. From issues 259 through 261, we see Hobgoblin and Rose form a new partnership, as well as Hobgoblin kidnapping Harry Osborn's wife and Mary Jane Watson. Hobgoblin tries to use this leverage to blackmail Harry Osborn into obtaining more journals. He ultimately does obtain a single one, but Spider-Man saves everyone, and Hobgoblin learns the information inside the journal is redundant. He then pledges to forget about the journals and forge his own path forward. DeFalco used Hobgoblin for a second story, a two-parter across issues 275 and 276. This time around, Hobgoblin has some new weaponry and goes up against Spider-Man, gaining a decisive win. Spider-Man is in his black suit, but it's cloth, not the Venom symbiote, just to be clear. In the second issue, Spider-Man recovers, and in a fight, he covers the Goblin's face in webbing. The Hobgoblin rips off his mask and flees into a warehouse with Spider-Man right behind. Spider-Man dives through the flooring and nabs an unconscious Hobgoblin, only to pull off the mask to see the face of his old friend Flash Thompson underneath. Of course, the end of the story shows us that the real Hobgoblin is still out there, and he simply framed Flash to keep the heat off of himself. It's worth noting that the editors on the Spider-Man titles had been reassigned again for these issues and moving forward. DeFalco was now being edited by Jim Owsley, today known as Christopher Priest. Priest was only 22 years old, placed in a position editing DeFalco, who had been a senior editor and writer at Marvel for years. The thinking was probably that the Spider titles were in the hands of seasoned pros, so the editor just needed to guide things. Priest has never spoken about this tumultuous time in interviews, but he did write about it obliquely in his own blog. One thing he said was that, quote, "It was criminally stupid to have a 22-year-old neophyte editor edit his own boss," end quote. He also said, quote, "If I had to do it over again, I would never have accepted the appointment as editor of the Spider-Man franchise. I made a lot of mistakes. I hurt a lot of people. I lost a lot of friends. It's a difficult thing for me to discuss," end quote. And now we enter the final act of this story, where Hobgoblin's identity will be revealed. It gets ugly at this point. It seems like a lot of feelings were hurt, a lot of friendships were ended, a lot of the people that were involved in the Spider-Man books at this time are very angry with one another. It's pretty sad. It seems to involve some deliberate sabotage against at least one person, according to everyone else that was involved in the books at the time. The next Hobgoblin story is a 5-part story about a gang war across organized crime figures in New York, including Hobgoblin and the Rose, Kingpin, and Hammerhead, among others. Issues 284 and 285 give DeFalco a plotting credit, but Priest himself took over scripting duties and writes the final 3 issues, credited as Jim Owsley. At the same time, Priest wrote a Spider-Man one-shot, Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, that takes place just after these 5 issues, but before the following monthly issue of Amazing Spider-Man. He did this quietly without telling any of the other writers on the Spider-Man books. The specifics of Hobgoblin's actions and characterization this time around are not as important as what happened behind the scenes, because editor Priest decided to sabotage Tom DeFalco's stated goal of revealing the Hobgoblin. The writers of the Spider-Man books went to a retreat, and Priest asked DeFalco point blank who was behind Hobgoblin's mask. DeFalco stated that it was going to be Ned Leeds, Peter Parker's co-worker at the Daily Bugle. And ultimately, that's what Christopher Priest wrote. He killed off Ned Leeds in the Spider-Man vs. Wolverine comic, and then had Ned Leeds revealed as the Hobgoblin in issue 289, which he assigned Peter David to write. Priest also had DeFalco and friends fired off of the Spider-Man title immediately before the one-shot issue with Wolverine was released. In actuality, DeFalco, of course, planned to reveal that Richard Fisk was the man behind Hobgoblin, but he never got his opportunity because Christopher Priest believed that it was intended to be Ned Leeds, and that's what he wrote, and that's what became canon at the time. It was a total mess. Priest also ended up revealing the Rose's identity, and for that he used Richard Fisk. None of these writers were using Roderick Kingsley. In 2009, back issue number 35 interviewed the parties involved on the Spider-Man titles at that time to clear up what had happened. Priest did not comment. Peter David had been writing Spectacular Spider-Man and was hired to write Amazing Spider-Man starting with issue 289, directly after the Gang War storyline, trying to retroactively explain the Ned Leeds reveal. He ultimately told the story of Ned Leeds being surprised and overpowered by the assassins, while simultaneously unveiling Hobgoblin again. This time, it wasn't a mystery, it was mercenary Jason Massendale who took over the empty suit, having been in the title for quite a while as second-string villain Jack-O-Lantern. David summarized what went down behind the scenes, saying, quote, Owsley comes into my office, I was working at Marvel in the direct sales department at the time, and he says, we're going to go out for lunch and discuss who the Hobgoblin is going to be. And I said, what are you talking about? The Hobgoblin is Ned Leeds. And he said, no, he's not Ned Leeds. And I said, what do you mean? We all discussed this at the writers' conference. And those are the stories that Tom has been writing. And Owsley says, Tom's not doing the book anymore, and it's not going to be Ned Leeds, and I'm going to tell you who it's going to be. So, we went out to lunch, and Owsley reveals to me that he's killing off Ned Leeds in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine one-shot. And I said, what the bleep do you mean? Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin. And he said, no. And I said, why are you doing this? And Owsley said, to piss off DeFalco. And I said, well, that's kind of juvenile. Look, you've got to rethink this. And he said, it's already drawn. DeFalco commented on being let go, saying, quote, Owsley killed off Ned to screw up my continuity. Then he decided to fire me instead. He thought he'd throw me a curveball by killing off Ned. I would have been annoyed about it, but it wouldn't have been a curveball for me because I never intended for the Hobgoblin to be Ned anyway. I just knew I couldn't trust Owsley, and this proved it. On Priest's blog post, he strangely wrote that at the time, quote, suddenly Ned Leeds was the Hobgoblin, a move that infuriated Roger Stern, but one that I had absolutely nothing to do with, end quote. In that issue of Back Issue, Stern, DeFalco, and David all replied to this. Stern commented, quote, I wasn't infuriated at all. I saw it as an opportunity. I realized that the stuff established in number 289 could serve as the foundation for a whole new story, end quote. DeFalco and David both point out that they don't see how Priest could have had nothing to do with it since he was the editor at the time. And so Peter David retroactively told a story that explained how Ned Leeds had become the Hobgoblin. He said, quote, I was satisfied with what I wrote because I was thrust into a situation that I absolutely could not win. It's the most insane project I've ever been involved with. It was a story that I did because there was absolutely no other way to do it, end quote. Meanwhile, Priest wrote 2 issues of Web of Spider-Man to explain more backstory on Ned Leeds. Apparently, as Ned Leeds worked on his story to take down the Kingpin, he got so mad that he decided to turn to crime to get revenge on Kingpin, as well as teaming up with the Kingpin's son to do it. I'll be honest, I see that motivation as kind of weak, and I also never really saw Ned Leeds as having the charismatic personality that the Hobgoblin clearly does. On top of that, I don't understand how Ned Leeds had the money that Hobgoblin clearly does, because Hobgoblin buys information, he hires henchmen, he upgrades equipment, something I don't understand how Ned Leeds could have. Plus, Ned Leeds was married with a full-time job. It just didn't make sense to me. It fell flat for me as a reader at the time. I think it fell flat for a lot of readers at the time. And at this point, I don't think Hobgoblin ever recovered to become a top-tier villain ever again. The best I can say about this time is that overall things improved moving forward. And the single issue of Spider-Man vs. Wolverine in a vacuum is a cool Cold War espionage story. It's just that Ned Leeds reveal in the middle that comes out of left field and does not connect at all. The 5-part gang war story also features the first issue of Spider-Man that Eric Larson ever illustrated. In general, all of the issues with Hobgoblin have strong artwork. The early stuff with Stern had the writer paired with John Romita Jr. in his early days, and you can witness the artist grow from a solid but generic Marvel style into his own confident artwork. There are some covers by Mike Zeck that look great too. But what made Hobgoblin cool was mostly from the first man to write him, Roger Stern. He made Hobgoblin a schemer, a manipulator, someone quite a bit different from Green Goblin. The mystery of his identity captured the reader's imaginations, and if you go back, you'll see speculation across the letters pages of the book. Over a decade later, Marvel let Roger Stern write a mini-series called Hobgoblin Lives. It retroactively explains that Roderick Kingsley was the original Hobgoblin and that he had brainwashed Ned Leeds into thinking that he was Hobgoblin. That does seem like a trick Hobgoblin would employ since he'd used doubles before, but as to how a fashion mogul was able to reverse engineer the Goblin formula, I couldn't say. Regardless, while it makes a lot more sense than Ned Leeds, it was just too many years removed from the original story to make many waves with readers. In the mid-'80s, when Hobgoblin was created, the mystery identity was definitely a cool element of his character. But ultimately, that wasn't the only thing that made him cool. He was Hobgoblin. Yes, he was mysterious, but he was also confident, he was charismatic, he was cunning, and he was very capable. And ultimately, that was more than enough. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'm going to be back next week with my year-end wrap-up, telling you what I thought the best books of 2021 were. I am now trying to make YouTube a full-time thing, so if you want to support that for as little as $1, please consider hitting the link in the description below to check out my Patreon. That would mean a lot. And until I see you next time, keep reading comics.
This video sponsor, Lost in Cold, best known for their high-end premium deep dive books on games like Outer Wilds, Valhalla, and Animal World. They've just launched one of their biggest collaborations to date, the Alan Wake Design Works book, made in collaboration with Remedy Entertainment. This is the ultimate tribute to the entire Legendary series, giving a deep dive look at both of the main titles, as well as its spin-off American Nightmare. Get 5% off your purchase when you use offer code SkillUpAlan at checkout.
KZ.
Stick around to the end of the video.
KZ138. Kulsum, hello Kulsum, how are you? Hi, how are you Kulsum?
KZ138 says, what is Fave artist up to?
Nothing, just winding down after a long day. What about you?
Says, yo.
Hey Pokemon Sid, how are you? Easy, how is life in Canada?
Maseed says, doing good.
That's good to know, Pokemon Sid.
38 says, I went walking today. Poke Maseed says, WBU.
I've had a long tiring day. I'm just winding down. Kulsum, tell me about your walk. Tell me about your life. Give me updates. What's going on?
KZ138 says, Yahund life bruv.
Hund live, bro? What is this word, Jund?
Maseed says, I would go to sleep now, but I am hungry.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had a burger, so I'm good. What is Jhund life? Oh, Thund. You mean Thund.
38 says summer is ending already. Yahund is effed up.
Oh, I thought it was gonna be Thund. I have never heard this word Jhund. What is this? Is this a Karachi term? I've never heard this.
KZ138 says it's a Mumbai term.
That's interesting. Pokemon Sid, who is from.
Says oh Yahund. Means crowd.
Okay. Jhund. Jhund. Jhund is kind of. Pokemon Sid, who's also in chat. Pokemon Sid is from Mumbai, so he would know. Well, he's from Maharashtra, I think, right? Am I wrong? Pokemon Sid? I'm not wrong, am I?
38 says not crowd.
What have the people you made friends with in Dubai been teaching you?
Poke Maseed says yes, Mumbai is Maharashtra.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Mumbai is in Maharashtra, but I get confused sometimes. Like I wasn't. For a moment I forgot that you're also in Mumbai. I remember Maharashtra, but there. Yeah, never mind. No. Somebody else who comes in here is from Maharashtra, but not from Mumbai. Now I can't remember who that is. Yeah, so what is this? Let's.
Maseed says at KZ138 yeah, it's kinda not crowd, but we use it to refer a crowd. Here is Mumbai sometimes.
Okay, yeah, let's figure out the etymology of this word that KZ used. KZ, were people? Is this a word taught to you by Mumbai friends in Canada or Mumbai friends in?
KZ138 says crowd, while Yahund is also used in Karachi.
Jhund. Is it Jhund or Jhund? Like type 1 for Jhund, type 2 for Jhund.
Poke Maseed says Yahund is like a group of animals. More accurately,
Chat, type 1 for Jhund and type 2 for Jhund.
KZ138 says one is used when life is effed up.
Jhund. I've never heard this word.
KZ138 says two is used for crowd.
I have never heard this word.
Poke Maseed says oh Yahand.
Jhund.
Poke Maseed says not Yahund.
Apparently Jhund, not Jhund. Interesting. Maybe the people who KZ learned this from are from like a different part of Mumbai.
KZ138 says it is a slang term on the streets.
Okay. Well, I think Pokemon Sid is pretty much on the streets. Last time he was here, he was telling us about like the metro and the jetty, the what marina.
KZ138 says many Indian comedians use it in their stand-up set.
Okay, that's possible. Cool, we all learned something new, huh? Indian stand-up is very funny. Friends, tell me more about your day. Tell me what's going on.
Learn more. Gamers, what's happening? Good to see you back. Here's the thing, with Gamescom out the way, there hasn't been a lot of really big news this week, so we're going to do something a little different for this week's show. We typically go deep on 2 or 3 big stories at the top of the show before moving on to a bit of a lightning round.
And
Spread things out a little. We'll cover even more stories with a little more brevity. Honestly, I'm kind of pumped about it since there's lots of interesting stuff going on, but none of it needs like a 5-minute block. Anyway, always better to show instead of tell. So let's get to it. If you really press me, I will admit that there was one big news story this week, and it's the news that finally, 400,000 years after it was initially announced, and after the most thunderous prolonged silence in the history of silences, Hollow Knight Silksong finally has a release date, and it's next week? That's right, that is not a troll. You can hang up your Hollow Knight clown makeup meme JPEG forever, because on September 4th of this very year, just a week from today, Hollow Knight Silksong will ship to all consoles and PC. This was revealed during a dedicated showcase at Gamescom in Germany, and attendees were able to go hands-on with the game during the show. The reports are that it's more Hollow Knight, and people wouldn't have it any other way. This is not a sequel that's looking to rewrite the formula, since the formula was already basically perfect. It's more about a more versatile moveset and an expanded combat repertoire, and everyone who got their hands on it had nothing but positive stuff to say.
The sun was out, it was still 12 degrees in the shade, so it is a turned scene.
Bloomberg, and the response was,
it was indeed a turned scene.
Opposite of what we were expecting. We've all heard of development hell. How about development heaven? Quote, we're very fortunate that we have a development method that is so enjoyable. Not exactly sure how we stumbled into that. Everything comes together quickly. You can see results fast. Ideas turn into something that exists in the game almost immediately before your eyes, and that's very satisfying. And that allows you to go off on these tangents and meet weird characters because someone's offhandedly mentioned a weird character as an idea and the other person's laughed, and that's enough, end quote. Jesus Christ, boys, your average game dev has a permanent 1,000-yard stare as they relive the PTSD of crunching on some bullshit live service that they don't want to be working on, and these guys are just out here daydreaming about how much fun they're having. To be honest, it's a nice story that's all about Team Cherry harvesting the benefits of their talent and success, so good on them. And it's really
You wanted to be at work, huh?
Something cool and taking
their scaling
up and turning
yeah, because the day was nice, the sun was out.
Team Cherry's Shadow Drop release date is that it's prompted a number of other games, mainly indie games, to get out of the blast radius, announcing delays rather than risk going toe-to-toe with what will likely be one of the best-selling games of the year. Eterna Lucis is a Metroidvania sequel that was meant to launch...
Vakar Big! Hello, Vakar. How are you? It's been a while.
had to say, quote, "After the announcement of Silksong, we are fully aware that our game wouldn't have the visibility it deserves. Competing with a phenomenon of that scale would not only be unfair to our team's efforts, but also to you, the community, who expect to experience this adventure under the best possible conditions. Instead of rivalry, what we feel is gratitude. Thanks to them, the Metroidvania genre is more alive than ever, and in fact, they were one of the main inspirations that led us to create Eterno Noctis and the entire saga now in development," end quote.
I'm alright. Same.
In development that was about to hit 1.0 on September 9th. Now, not so much. Quote, "This wasn't an easy decision. We've poured years of work and love into Feyland. We want to make sure it arrives at a time when it can receive the attention and care it deserves," end quote. Even non-Metroidvanias are running for the hills. Clover Pit is a roguelike that will now launch a few weeks later. Demon School is a tactics-style JRPG inspired by Persona games, and it's now been pushed back nearly 2 months into November. And Devolver Digital's upcoming Baby Steps will also be pushed back a few weeks, and they even made a trailer to celebrate.
Walkart Fake says, "How is your YBR?"
My YBR is good. Still up and at it.
Some Sony news, and the head of studios Herman Holst recently gave an interview to the Financial Times where he spoke about the challenges of balancing the creative with the commercial. Quote,
We should go somewhere one of these weekends, man. The weather's nice.
"For us, when we fail,
Dogma
to
Seed
fail
says, "Man,
early
it
and
rained so
cheaply,"
much in
end
Mumbai
quote.
today.
Yeah, well, I bet your shareholders...
Oh, I'm sorry. It's been raining a lot in Pakistan as well.
Speaking specifically...
We're having major floods.
Sony's failure folder, Concord, here's what he had to say, quote, "We have since put in place much more rigorous and much more frequent testing in many different ways. The advantage of every failure is that people now understand how necessary that oversight is," end quote. People. Regardless, the
Walkart
live
Fake
service trend
says,
keeps
"Sure,
on a
man,
chugging,
what?"
and Sony's gluttonous ambition on this front hasn't netted them many great results. When
Yeah, one of these weekends we can try for something.
launched by March 2026,
I was thinking of going to Anguri one of these
the
days.
number of live service releases...
Have you been to Anguri?
What is important to me is having a diverse set of player experiences and a set of communities, end quote. I am sorry to break it to you, my dude, but the number of live services is important.
Okay, so I've this post down. Now I'm thinking, what kind of interesting costuming could I be doing with this?
Population, and a huge volume of those hours is already soaked up by deeply entrenched games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Roblox, Minecraft, and more. There's very little room for new successful live service titles, which is why, for example, Ubisoft shut down X Defiant last year, despite it being a pretty decent shooter, and it's also why we start running the shutdown clock the minute a zany new team shooter is announced. Anyway, all of that live service talk aside, Sony are actually pretty good at managing their studios and letting them get on with what they want to make. Mikhail Haveri is brand director at House Mark, the studio behind the incredible Returnal and the legendary Resogun. Here's what he had.
Yeah, Returnal nahi kheli maine abhi tak. Has anybody played Returnal?
It was a little bit scary. Being bought by a bigger company feels like you're just about to be swallowed by this bigger fish, but it was more like we still got to
Windola
function like a
says
small
the
studio
drawing is
with
straight
access
up
to the
ass.
resources.
Hello, Indoella. How are you?
User
Step
8
back
says
from
a
the world of
butt plug is
esports.
always
They
a must
previously
for the
bought the rights to
suppose
the fighting
LUL.
Oh my god.
They're now on selling it to Nodwin Gaming, the South Asian gaming esports.
I'm encouraging the wrong kind of thought with this drawing.
Indirectly have a stake in Evo.
Nameless
It's a
User 8
de-risked
says,
position given
Windola,
the
you
ownership
don't
stake
know
is
with
significantly
LUL.
reduced and shared with other financial backers.
How are you, Nameless?
Of Evo, no doubt keen to help push their upcoming Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, which by the way is just about to get the close.
Artist friends in chat, share your latest work. Let me see it.
One last bit of Sony news. It appears as though live service games are moving on from the humble PlayStation 4. 2 weeks back, Genshin Impact announced that they were no longer going to support the platform owing to hardware limitations. This past week, PUBG said the same thing, and now Yoshi P, the boss
Wait,
of
what?
Final Fantasy 14, the ownership stake is significantly reduced and shared with other financial backers. Sony will now become a new global sponsor of Evo, no doubt keen to help push their
Nameless
upcoming
User 8
Marvel
says
Tokon
shit
Fighting
asterisk.
Souls, which by the way is just about to get a closed beta, so be sure to sign up for that over on the PSN if you're at all interested. One last bit of Sony news. It appears as though live
Nameless
service games
User
are
8
moving
says
on
good,
from the
haven't
humble
seen you in a
PlayStation
while.
4. 2 weeks back, Genshin Impact announced that they were no longer going to support the platform owing to hardware limitations. This past week, PUBG said the same thing, and now Yoshi P, the boss man of Final Fantasy 14, is hinting that support for the PS4
Haven't seen me in a while. Yeah, I've been.
User 8 says,
say, quote, "My basic
Started a
stance is
lot
that
of
I do want
projects,
to
though.
continue supporting hardware
I've been
one concern, and that's regarding the OS of
I've been traveling. I've had some things to take care of, so I've been traveling off and on. So I haven't been streaming regularly, but I've been streaming off and on.
well, well, we are continually incorporating updates of Final Fantasy XIV, and we are now approaching that limit, end quote. He said that Sony have been working directly with them to find solutions for these limitations, but that Sony themselves are about to reach the
Is that a baton in your pocket, or you just happy to see me?
It may soon be time to upgrade your hardware. Sony may be reaching the limit of the support they can provide to their last-gen console,
Nameless
but it appears as
user
though
8 says that
Nintendo are at the
Blindola
limit
nice
of the
line
support
work.
they can provide to their next
Oh, when Vinduela, you shared. Vinduela shared. Cool. Let's see what weird, erotic, cosmic monstrosity Vinduela has in store for us. Let's check this out. Hold up.
Windola says it took a while to finish it due to school stuff.
Hold up. Okay. Oh yeah, so I've seen you do this one. Oh cool, you finished it up. Wait, it's either too big or too small. That's what she said. Cool. That's a lot of fun, man. That's like it feels kind of Indonesian. Like a lot of Garuda imagery from that part of Southeast Asia is like this. A lot of like Carnival. I'm also being reminded of like
Says just your average Nico Dragon Night Angel robot.
like a lot of you know, like carnival costumes from Brazil, or like I'm also being reminded of that. But yes, Chief. Oh man, I really liked specifically the kind of symmetry in the pose of these two like fingers of the wings. But yeah, it's got like major Garuda feels. I'm liking it. Top cuties, cute and on duty. Especially like the design of the breakdown of the foot, man. This is making me want to study feet and get better at them. Very nice. Cool, Windoella. Always nice when you share your stuff with us. What we're doing? We are doing.
The newly independent Digital Foundry revealed a really interesting tidbit during their recent post-Gamescom podcast. Here's what John Lindemann had to say, quote,
Windola says one
Nintendo
day
seems to
you'll
be
be so
almost
good at art you'll
discouraging
put my
Switch 2
pen to
development
paper
to
and
some
draw in
degree.
3D
I've
space.
spoken with plenty of developers where they were told that their game, they should just ship it on Switch 1 and rely on backwards compatibility. There's a lot of developers that are unable to get Switch 2 dev kits.
One day I'll be so good at art I'll put my pen to paper and draw in 3D space. What do you mean by that? What do you mean draw in 3D space? You have to explain what you mean there.
We talked to a lot of devs at Gamescom this year, and so many of them said the same things. They want to ship on Switch 2. They would love to do Switch 2 versions. They can't get the hardware. It's really difficult right
says
now.
I'm so
end
good
quote.
I transcend
That
the
is
2D plane.
pretty wild. Imagine launching a brand new console, the most successful.
I think what you're talking about is sculpture, Windoella. The world knows it as sculpture. Or relief painting. Or some people do very interesting cutout stuff where they have like these frames are like
Windola says yes Kappa.
they have these frames are like 2 or 3 inches deep, and they have different layers of like cutouts, 2D cutouts that are placed in 3D space, and they do interesting work. Oh, there's also 3D pens. Have you seen 3D pens? They're like these pens, and like you can make like wireframes out of them in 3D space. So I think that stuff is achievable.
Full console.
What do I do with this, man? I have a pose. The pose is interesting. Wondering what I can turn this into.
Seen him yet.
Launch in the history of video games and not providing the dev kits required for developers to make games for the thing. I mean, that's how Nintendo make a huge cut of their money, by the way. Third-party sales are a big part of any platform holder's profit and loss, so it's rather baffling that they'd be playing it this way. Is it some sort of production shortage? Unlikely, I think. It's not like Nintendo couldn't have projected how many dev kits would be required. More likely, Nintendo are tacitly encouraging developers to ensure their games still ship on a console 150 million units. But surely developers are going to be naturally incentivized towards that anyway, right? A very puzzling except for the fact that it's Nintendo we're talking about, and then it becomes like
infinite fertilizer.
a little more platform news now. With Xbox locking in an October 10th release date for their Asus-made handheld, Microsoft are pushing out Xbox app updates in preparation. They just put out a blog post that read, quote, "Starting this week, Xbox insiders enrolled in the PC gaming preview will be the first to experience the new My Apps feature in the Xbox PC app on Windows 11 PCs and handhelds. You can conveniently access your games and essential third-party applications such as browsers, gaming utilities, or storefronts, all within the Xbox PC
Fallen
app." End quote.
Hankai 5
Bottom
says
line for
cheap
this is that
followers
your
on
Steam
screen
games
Oh god.
other platform
the
launches
space
will soon be
at
accessible through the
9PRLFQR
Xbox
kit.
app. This is something that Microsoft has continued to hint at for some time now, going so far as to mistakenly include a Steam page in some of their Xbox marketing before promptly removing it. They recently confirmed that this cross-storefront integration was on the
Josh, give me updates on your lives. Tell me what's going on.
agnostic approach. It makes sense that this rollout.
Tell me something good that's happened to you.
Pricing for the ROG Xbox Ally, by the way, which is kind of weird
Blindola
because it's out
says
in
I'ma
5
clean my
weeks,
whole
and
apartment
also because they
tomorrow.
recently did a round of hands-on impressions at Gamescom.
Cool.
Various leagues put the base model at being around the same price as the Steam Deck OLED, which would make it a pretty good deal given all that cross-functionality. But the high-spec model is rumored to be upwards of $899 US, which is a hell of a lot of money. Please do take that figure with a grain of
Ugh.
salt. It is unconfirmed, but the Asus ROG Ally X is $899, so I don't think those leaks are at all out of the realm of possibility. Turning to some studio news now, and we're learning more about the recently announced layoffs at Cloud Chamber, the studio who have spent the better part of a decade working on the next BioShock game. Recently, Take-Two
Blindola
removed the
says, "I
studio
had like
and
4
game leads
tests the
before
last 2
parachuting in
weeks
Rod
after
Ferguson,
studying
who had
13
previously been
hours a day a
parachuted
whole
into
month
irrational
straight."
game.
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask about that because we started talking. How did your test go?
Is a strong closer. While Take-Two are parachuting Rod in, they're opening the hatch and shoving 80 other people out. Jason Schreier is reporting that of the 250 people currently employed across the studio group, 80 of them will be let go as Take-Two delays BioShock 4 into a 2027 release window. Recently, Schreier reported that the game had failed to pass an internal review milestone, with the game's narrative being a key sticking point. Take-Two even sort of acknowledged the challenges in their own way, saying that right now they had a good game, but they wanted to deliver a great one, which is just about as close as you're ever going to get to these companies acknowledging that things aren't all
Blindola says, "I
hunky-dory."
mean, I
It's highly
passed at
likely that
least
we're
one,
about to
and I
enter a
think
period of
he'll
radio
pass all
silence as
3.
the team reorients and prepares to reveal sometime in 2026.
Cool.
Summer Games Fest, maybe? Jeff Keighley, if you're watching.
Good job, Windoella.
One last bit of layoffs news now.
Windoella, how long are your tests?
The studio Giant Squid has laid off one of its staff members. Natalie Spizzle was an environment artist who announced her job loss on Blue Sky, but she also confirmed that she appears to be the only one. Quote, "I believe I'm currently the only one laid off for now. Not sure where the rumors are coming from that it was the whole studio or majority of. I was one of 14 devs,
Blindola
so if that
says
puts
5
things into
hours.
perspective," end quote. This no
Jeez, 5-hour tests.
the studio boss Matt Nather
Is there like, is this a practical test or
when he chatted to us on
is it just theory and papers and writing and stuff?
go for a while until Sony's indie team swooped in and saved them, lining up a deal that would guarantee funding for their game in return for it being day one on Sony's PS Plus subscription service. It's unclear if the studio has funding lined up
Blindola
for their
says,
next
"Hear it."
title, but let's hope so, because this is a really special studio full of exceptional.
Jeez, 5 hours of theory. That sounds horrible.
By the way, if you want to get the full story behind Matt Nava's comments on the deal he did with Sony, you can find them on the most recent episode of the Friends Per Second podcast, or as a write-up on thisweekinvideogames.com. Link below the like button. Hey, speaking of the website, we've got a really exciting announcement. From the get-go, we set a goal of welcoming in expert columnists, giving you deep original insight into the world of video games. Well, we couldn't be more proud of our latest addition to that roster, Victoria Tran. You might know her in her capacity as the community manager for Inner Sloth, the developers of Among Us, who would later go on to found an indie publishing label, Outer Sloth. By virtue of the many hats she wears, Victoria has a huge amount of insight into the indie game scene, and that's exactly what her monthly Indie Insights column will cover. It's a behind-the-scenes look at the challenges and joys of indie game making, and her first column covers one of the sector's most notorious blights, copycat games. You know, the ones that are just straight-up carbon copies of indie breakouts like Unpacking or Peak, and that go up in the App Store to fleece people with shitty in-game spending. Victoria has a lot to say on the subject, so if you want to read that and more, then sign up as a supporter over on thisweekinvideogames.com. Very pumped to have Victoria on board, and stay tuned for more exciting announcements to come, because we've certainly got some in the works, trust me. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, friends, there's a hell of a lot here. After Opening Night Live dropped 50 trailers on us last week, the Future Game Show dropped about the same. Then there was everyone else and his dog at Gamescom who didn't have the cash to get up on a showcase. And of course, there was Team Cherry, who just decided, like, fuck it, and they dropped a bomb on top of everyone and everything. We won't go through every single thing here, as a lot of it will no doubt crop up in the months and years to come as they get closer to release, so we'll skim through some of the highlights. Now, Jeff did have Nexon's We Have Tom Clancy's Division at Home game during his showcase, a title by the name of Cinder City, but you know what's even better than that? Actual Tom Clancy's The Division 2, which has well and truly reignited its roadmap for the next couple of years, headlined by a new game mode called Survivors, which is Ubisoft finally leaning hard into the survival extraction thing.
So
this
far
series
up north,
unknowingly
you're constantly
predated and
fatigued
left
due
on
to
the
lack
table
of light
big time. It
and
wasn't until they
freezing
like
because
left the
heating in your
restaurant, took a
apartment
cab
is
home and got
crap.
into bed that they realized
You
what they had
study
done.
13
So now
hours
they're
a day
finally
per
turning
week,
back
so
and
you
trying to
can
make a
take a
grab of it.
5-hour test which you have to pass if you want to get your study grant.
Jeez, dude, I'm sorry. That does not sound fun. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how you Scandinavians live where you live, man. I don't think human beings are meant to live where you guys live. Well, a lot of the places. Earlier,
Says we are not.
yeah, KZ was in here earlier. I don't know if she's still in here, but yeah, she was also saying that it's like it was a super sunny day, but it was 12 degrees in the sun. She's in Canada, and you know, like, as nice as your countries are,
Says, but TBH, how the hell do you live in the Middle East where it gets 50 C?
I'm not in the Middle East. Pakistan is not in the Middle East. But yeah, I get you. Yeah, to be fair, I don't think we're meant to be living there either. I think, I don't know why humanity lives beyond the tropics. We should all just be living on the tropics. And, like, stop breeding when we reach the end of the tropics, you know?
Survivors will be led by one
Alright, back.
Janssen, who earlier Division fans will remember as the creative director of the original Division, as well as Far Cry 3. He seemed to take a bit of a break before coming back to take care of that Avatar game a little while ago. No day for that Survivors update yet, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on it. While we're here, we may as well cover the other random Gamescom Ubisoft announcement. After indicating that there would be no DLC for Assassin's Creed Mirage, which came out back in 2023, Ubisoft has said that they will be releasing a free expansion to the game featuring a new story chapter, new missions, and a new location set in 9th century Al Ula, which is an
Windola
ancient
says
city
thought
located
Pakistan
in
was at
modern-day
least in the
Saudi
general area
Arabia.
of the Middle East.
Interesting, since there were a few reports of Ubisoft meeting with Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund earlier in the year, which the company did not confirm nor deny, but hey, say no more, Eve. Say no more. Escape from Tarkov, the extraction shooter that sometimes likes to gouge its community, it's finally coming out of beta and entering a full 1.0 release. This is happening on November 15th, and it comes after over 8 years in beta. Those are some Warframe numbers right there. No console plans or anything for this one. It remains a hardcore PC thing only. at least at the moment. Speaking of hardcore, man, have you checked in with the horse game community yet? They are absolutely frothing over this next one, Windstorm: The Legend of Komori, which is the 13th century Mongolian horse riding game that went viral a few months ago. No violent conquering of Asia in this game though. Windstorm is focused solely on horse breeding, training, and riding as you play the role of a courier. This one's launching into early access on November 4th, PC only. All right, back to the gory stuff now. Halloween, they're making a new game based on this slasher series. I bet you're wondering, is it an asymmetrical multiplayer game like all the other horror adaptations? Yes, of course it is. Why would you think otherwise? Apparently there will be a single player mode for it as well. However, you'll play as Michael Myers, surprise, surprise. No release date for this one just yet. If you think a combination of Armored Core like mech action, cowboy westerns, and Annapurna Interactive sounds like a good combo, then you're in good company. Bounty Star: The Morose Tale of Graveyard Clem is one of the titles on Annapurna's slate this year, and it's just got a release. Like, is it going to be Trauma? It's probably going to be Trauma. Hey, speaking of Trauma, War, that really intense World War II game, Hell Let Loose, is getting a follow-up, this time set in Vietnam. Now, this used to be developed by an Aussie studio until Team 17 in the UK took over with a new developer, Expression Games. They're the ones handling this next one too, which is due out in 2026. As for what the original team is doing, they haven't announced it yet, but based on the skull smoking a joint on their new website, I don't think it's going to be anything like this. Let's squeeze in a few more here. 1348 Ex Voto is a new cinematic action-adventure game set in 14th century Italy, coming from a new studio called Sedlio, made up of 15 folks. Set for 2026 for all platforms bar Switch.
Windola says who makes these geographical distinctions
Lost Rift
anyways.
is the survival extraction game from People Can Fly, who have really been through it this past couple of years. This one launches into PC early access on September 25th. Tropico 7 is a new entry in Calypso's Dictator Management series. Man, these must do really well. This one's slated for 2026 for all platforms bar Switch. If you like your strategy games a bit more spacey and or nerdy, you might be pleased to hear that there's a new Star Trek strategy game called Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown, but that one doesn't have a date yet. That open world MMORPG Where Winds Meet, which is free to play but apparently not a gacha game.
Gosh darn it, my microwave I think has stopped working again.
While Rue Valley, a new time-looping RPG inspired by Disco Elysium and was actually endorsed by...
In the general area of the Middle East, I mean, so the closest I guess is that we border Iran, you know. And even Iran is culturally, I mean, it's kind of considered part of the Middle East, but culturally it's kind of different from the Middle Eastern nations. And then we culturally are not Middle Eastern. We're much closer to India culturally than we are to any of the Middle Eastern countries. We are South Asians.
Robert Kurvitz and Alexander Rostov, now has a release date of 11th of November for all platforms. And finally, two release dates the team here are very excited about. The first is the early access release date for EA's big free-to-play live service Skate game, which launches on 16th of September for all platforms bar Switch. And the second big one is Luminous Arise, which is launching on PC and PS5 on November 11th. And there's actually a limited time multiplayer demo for that one you can grab right now. All right, that's enough of the announcements. So what came out last week? So we quite liked the Rogue Prince of Persia when it first launched into early access. This is the 2D roguelike Prince of Persia game from Evil Empire, who shepherded Dead Cells until the end. It finally launched into 1.0 this past week, and a lot has changed since then. Even the whole color palette, which honestly surprised me. I kind of like the purple. Anyway, the recent reviews for this one are sitting at very positive, with 91% of folks giving it a thumbs up, which is broadly consistent to what it was sitting at throughout its early access period. Speaking of shepherding, Herdling was that emotional looking herding game from Okomotive and Panic, and that one seems to have made an impact with a strong 81 on OpenCritic. GameSpot gave this one 9 out of 10 with a big emphasis on how well the game treated its creatures. Quote, "Together, the child and their ever-growing herd of companions, not pets, go on an often heartwarming, sometimes heart-wrenching adventure back to nature. It's a journey I'll remember for a long time thanks to its depiction of animals as unique individuals who, very much like us, are chiefly seeking love and safety. It was one of my favorite experiences in video games to help them find that safety and feel that loved," end quote. Big change of gears now, literally. How about that Gears of War Reloaded? This is the second time they've remastered this bad boy, so you'd think they'd be really good at it by now. This has landed at a strong 81 on OpenCritic, and yeah, it sounds like it's Gears of War again, which, you know, I guess, sure, let's do that. Here's what Checkpoint Gaming had to say after giving it 6.5 out of 10. Quote, "Gears of War Reloaded is the definitive version of Gears 1, but only by default. faithful remaster of a remaster that keeps the series alive. It opens the door to PlayStation fans, but doesn't do enough to feel essential. It's both dated and timeless, clunky and exhilarating, simple and unforgettable, a solid nostalgia trip, but a missed opportunity to make the original shine for modern audiences, end quote. And finally, Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar was what we called the Good Harvest Moon last week, and that's checked out with the review scores, it seems, a strong 83 on OpenCritic, with lots of praise for the glow-up of what was originally a 3DS game. Here's the gamer who scored it 4 out of 5 stars, saying, quote, Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar takes on an older title that is far from being a series favorite and refines it into something that fans are sure to enjoy. Unrestrained from the restrictions of the Nintendo DS and with a new lease on life thanks to new features, refinements, and an overhauled presentation, Grand Bazaar finally manages to live up to its full potential, end quote. Okay, so what's coming out this week? It's starting to feel like the end of year games rush is upon us, folks, let me tell you, so let's get right into it. Thursday the 28th is a big day with Konami's latest remake and reminder that they used to make great games.
Who makes these geographical distinctions anyways?
Reviews for this one are already out, and they currently sit at a mighty 87, with basically all the reviews talking about how the game has definitely stood the test of time in terms of its stealth gameplay and impactful storytelling, but how the remake itself is incredibly safe. Even with these criticisms, I'm sure Konami are pretty happy with this one. This one's available for all consoles bar Switch. Also on Thursday is Sega's revival of Shinobi, the one called Art of Vengeance. This one's been developed by Lizard Cube, who are the team behind the excellent Streets of Rage revival, another Sega property, and they've knocked it out of the park with this one too.
The one and
Reviews for
only
this one
God.
are already out on account.
What the hell?
And they're also sitting at a mighty 87 at the time of writing. Austin
No, it's various
loved it, strongly recommended it.
colonial powers.
Review and the website right up below the like button. Great combat, great art, and a breezy Metroidvania structure are the talk.
And climatologists.
We just had a strong Ninja Gaiden retro revival too. Shinobi comes out on all platforms. Couldn't not mention this one. Destiny Rising is also coming out on Thursday. This is of course the mobile version of Destiny developed by NetEase, with all the free-to-play and gacha engrams you can eat. Just how much of the current Destiny audience will make the brave and dangerous leap into this one? I'm very curious, because I think that a lot of people will. I think people are very ready to step into a new sort of Destiny experience, and honestly, having played some of the beta of Destiny Rising, it delivers quite a bit, believe me. Speaking of games that suck up your time, there's also a Kirby game coming out on Thursday. Did you get that one, by the way? Kirby sucks up time. Anyway, let's move on. Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Star-Crossed World is quite possibly the longest game title after Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Jamboree TV. But I think when push comes to shove, Kirby has a lot more admirers because he's not full of random bullshit. There's a new story expansion in this one, of course, but it's also your first chance to experience Kirby's beautiful round form in 4K. Davy X Jones is one we mentioned a few times on the show now. This is a supernatural pirate FPS that's launching into early access on Thursday as well. Looks very cool, PC only for this one. On Friday the 29th, Lost Soul Aside releases on PC and PS5. Now this one was first revealed back in 2016 as a solo project by a Chinese developer called Yang Bing, and it was eventually picked up by Sony Interactive as part of their China Hero project. Yang got a team together and started fleshing it out, with Sony continuing to be a backer all the way through. It's a little bit Final Fantasy 15, a little bit Devil May Cry, and they're certainly not trying to hide those inspirations. Also interesting to note, this one hasn't really been marketed very much by Sony, so we'll have to keep our eye on this one. Jumping over to next Tuesday now, when September hits, and we've got Metal Eden launching on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. This is the fast-paced sci-fi FPS from Rycon Games, who are the folks behind the excellent Ruiner. Quite a few games with this vibe lately, but this one looks neat regardless, and the Steam demo for it seems to have gotten a pretty good reception. How you play these sorts of games on a controller though, I'll never know. One day later, we've got Damon Blades launching into early access, which was announced just last week at Gamescom. This is a co-op first-person action RPG roguelite, which I'm sure checks a lot of boxes for folks on Steam. This one comes from the team who made a game called I, Divine Cybermancy over 10 years ago now, which was also a co-op FPS RPG that was messy and hard as hell, but people loved it. They also made Necromunda Hired Gun and Space Hulk Deathwing, both of which were kind of love it or hate them Warhammer games. Personally, I really like Necromunda Hired Gun, despite its obvious jank. Anyway, Damon Blades is out on PC, early access this week. And finally on Wednesday next week, we have a game called Hirogami launching on PC and PS5. This one is being developed by Bandai Namco's South Asian studios in Singapore and Malaysia, but weirdly it's not being published by Bandai Namco. A Japanese outfit called Kakahashi Games is doing the honors. It's an action platformer game set in an
Hope Maseed
origami
says,
world
man,
where
I
your
always
protagonists
wondered
conform
whenever I
themselves
saw
into different
vlogs of
animals with different
Pakistan.
powers, and it's doing the whole
Like in
low
India,
frame
I
rate
can put
animation
roads
thing.
into
Looks
two
really nice, and
categories.
there's a free demo on
Either
Steam
they are
right
bad
now
all
if
the
you're
way or like
curious.
a really
Okay,
good
so we
road.
briefly touched
But
on
in
this one at the top of the
Pakistan,
show,
the
but
same
truth be
road
told,
goes
we
from
already
being
had
a
this
good
one
road
penciled
for
in
1
this
second
week's
to
show,
being a
and
bad
with Hollow
road to
Knight
being
knocking
no
it out of
road.
the pool, we thought it could
How
use a
does
little
that
more
work?
attention. So put this on your radar.
I think I've seen some videos about why certain things are really bad in India, and it's about different authorities vying over the same stuff, you know, trying to get.
Says lack of government funding is how.
Yeah, that's part of it, but it's also about unclarity in what authority has jurisdiction. There's like a lot of that, you know, and also like where are the funds being drawn from? Like it's not clear, you know, that okay, like this particular development authority has access to has domain over like this area, but they have a special case where they have to like get they cannot get money for development in this area from their coffers. They have to apply for the federal government, things like that, you know. So I think I've seen a few videos about certain areas of India where this is true as well. So it's kind of yeah, there's that case here as well in Pakistan, specifically when it comes to roads as well. Also, the thing is, so a lot of this also happens because so like a road has to be built, and our people have the know-how to build a road in like normal terrain, okay, but like we in certain areas of Pakistan you have certain mountains and stuff like that, you know, and so the development authorities don't always have the expertise to be able to build roads in mountains, etc., or whatever special terrain, you know. So but the contract is given to that authority, or that authority has a domain, so they try their best, and but then, you know, like unki bas ho jati hai, like all right, we can't do this, hey federal government, we need help with this. Oh, okay, we try to figure it out, and okay, maybe we hire some Chinese people to do this, you know, that kind of thing.
Windola says they should hire a couple of Roman legionaries.
Yeah. Interestingly, one of the main roads in Pakistan is called the GT Road. Now, GT stands for Grand Trunk Road. It was built by Alexander and his generals after him. You know, as they were doing their conquest across our lands. You know, way back then. So yeah, we do have some Greek era roads and stuff.
This is Demon's School.
Windola says, didn't Alexander try and push all the way into India?
He did. He got stopped in India. Basically, I mean, what is now Pakistan. He got stopped here. He was not allowed to cross the river Indus.
Including high school hijinks and managing your time around a school day, a social system to build relationships between your various party members, and of course, weird occult shit. But its big hook is the turn-based tactics combat system, where you have to plot out the movements and actions of your squad all at once before executing them, and momentum plays a really big part, a lot of push and pull and knocking enemies into each other, which is always great. Love that in Midnight Suns. We've been really impressed by the past demos for this one during Steam Next Fest, and it's honestly a bit of a bummer that it's been delayed several times now, but if you're a tactics or JRPG kind of person, then do keep this one in mind when it rolls around on November 19th, headed to all platforms. If you do like the look of Demon's School, you can check it out on our Steam curator page, which has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and over on the Epic Store, you can still grab Chimeru, which is that cozy frog sanctuary game, as well as Strange Horticulture, that mysterious botany puzzle mystery game. On Friday, they'll be replaced by Machinarium from Czech. Yeah,
we've done for the Mongols as well.
You will have well literally collected the studio's entire back catalog by now. In fact, I think this one's actually been offered before. Great game though. The studio does have a new title coming out, but it's not due until next year. So maybe these giveaways are what's keeping them afloat. Who knows? The other title on offer is
says,
Make
I am
Way,
yet
a
to see a
top-down
road like
multiplayer
that
party
in
racing
India.
game in the style of those old
Cause
Micro
most
Machine games, which I
long-distance
absolutely
highways
love.
are
The twist
directly
being that
made
you have
by
to
the
build
central
track
government,
together
not the
before
local
you race
bodies.
on it. This one got a pretty good rap when it came out, worth having in your library for those local.
No, the main arteries, the main motorways and stuff, they're all in one piece, like the biggest roads.
Co-op nights, if your friends are into that sort of thing. Our feel-good story for the week is pretty fucking cool, to be honest. A little while ago, we learned that as part of Sony's live service push, Insomniac Games were working on a live service multiplayer Spider-Man game. And while it's perfectly natural to feel very skeptical towards any newly announced live service, I think it's also perfectly natural to want to web sling alongside your buddies cruising New York City or Queens looking for goons to tag team and wombo combo. That project was canned, but luckily Sony has started releasing their games on PC, and that means that modders can do the Lord's work for us. This one came to our attention from a tweet from Okami13, a handle that often unearths interesting things. They pointed us to a mod from someone who goes by the handle HBGDA on Patreon, and they make mods for Marvel Spider-Man. Just this week, they shipped the first functional multiplayer mod for Spider-Man, and you know what? Having watched it, I am devastated that the live service game was cancelled because this shit looks fun as hell. If you're interested in that mod, I'll leave a link to the Patreon page below. It supports up to 16 players, mind you, so grab some friends, I guess. Anyway, that's the show for the week. I'm working on 2 reviews right now, both of which are under embargo, so I can't chat about them, but do expect them to drop sometime next week. And then I'm going to be playing Silk Song, and that's a sentence that I'd all but given up hope of ever being able to utter. Austin's working on a review for Metal Eden right now, which looks very promising. And we've also got an
Wandola
episode of
says,
Friends
I
Per
need to
Second
go to
podcast
bed and
going
dream
live
about
over the
petting
weekend with
flowers
special
and
guest
not
Paris
stepping
Lilly,
on Ant's
giving us a
TV
rundown
angel.
of everything on the show floor
Ah.
since he was over there. On the website, we've got Victoria.
Very Jainism dreams, huh?
Has an interesting piece going up real soon where he admits that he's just not that into Hollow Knight.
Go for it, friend.
Baby steps
Thank you for hanging out with me.
in its wake. It's a fair question. All that and daily ad-free news coverage,
Oak
reviews,
Masid
and
says,
previews
oh,
over
so
on this
those are
week
the
at
smaller
VGames.com.
roads are like
We'd love
that.
it if you'd sign up for free or
Well,
maybe
those
even
do
become a
vary in
supporter so we
India
can keep the
depending
lights
on the
on.
place,
For
but
now, though,
mostly
that's
they are
me signing
consistent
off.
in
A big thanks
quality,
for watching, and a big
which
thanks to
is
this video's
mediocre in
sponsor,
India.
Lost in Cult.
The only
Yeah.
highway
Video
roads I
games, so
have
there's a
seen
good
are
chance
in
you'll
Navi,
love this
Mumbai
video's
and
sponsor,
Sobo.
Lost in Cult. They're the outfit that put out thoughtful and beautifully designed books and music collections based on iconic games
Cool.
like Outer Wilds, Animal Well, Valhalla, and more. Well, they're back at it with one of their best and most requested collections yet. One based
Okay, next video. I don't know what to do, man.
Show. I'm your host Paul, aka Steven Spoilsberg. In this video, we're breaking down Back to the Future. The movie kick-started one of the best trilogies of all time, and today we're going to be going through its
These are my favorite films.
selected
The
but
first 2 Back to the Future films are probably my favorite films.
one of the best movies.
Movies.
And I can't wait to talk about it. Pretty much everyone I know who went to film school are in love with this movie, and the script's something that's taught in almost every university. This is something where almost every line in it has a payoff at some point, and I was blown away when revisiting it with a loser YouTuber breakdown at a more critical eye to it. So come with me, Morty, as we travel to the past and talk about Back to the Future.
You son of a bitch! I'm in!
And the film popped up as an idea in Bob Gale's head when he was one day going through his dad's old yearbook. Seeing his pops as a team made him think about his past and what life must have been like when he was in school. Being a dad myself, I feel like my kids will remember how cool I was, or they'll either think that or just what a fucking gimp. It's something that we as kids often don't wonder about our parents either, and all the wild things we've done, our parents probably did too.
When I was your age, I never chased a boy or called a boy or sat in a parked car with a boy.
I'm almost 18 years old. It's not like I've never parked before.
So that was
Going wild at parties,
I love these films, man.
all those bad things that we've done, they probably also did too. Our parents had a time before we were born too, where they probably weren't burdened with glorious purpose. Now this had Gale thinking that if he had a time machine, he'd go back and see his dad to see if they'd become friends. Marty and George share somewhat similarities, with them both having dreams that they want to achieve. George is obsessed with becoming a writer, and Marty just wants to play the guitar on stage. George not achieving his goals has somewhat had an effect on his son, but in the end, both get their time in the limelight.
I can't guess you guys aren't ready for that yet, but your kids are gonna love it.
Telling this idea to Robert Zemeckis, the pieces started to fall in place, and when Spielberg was on board, the ball really got rolling. Galen Zemeckis created a draft in 1980, with them saying they wanted to do something different than what had come before. You see, typically time travel movies, they showed the past as being a fixed point, whereas the pair had the idea that things could be changed. There's actually a number of different things that alter in the film, which we'll talk more about as we go through the movie. Still though, the first draft was a far cry from what we got.
I think there's potential here. I'm just really trying to figure out what I'm making.
Device that helped with the time travel. When I hear about it, I kind of imagine the TARDIS, and apparently this device then got put inside a fridge. This was then taken out to an atomic bomb test, with that being the basis of how to get home. However, Spielberg, he apparently worried that kids, might start climbing inside their fridges, and this would make some believe they could use one to survive a nuke. Years later, we'd see something similar in Indiana Jones, and dear me, just cracked up a bit learning that. Anyway, the time machine was going to be made by a corporation, but Zemeckis felt an individual was going to act better. Thus they looked at real-life figures such as Einstein, who Doc Brown's dog would later be named after.
Although under the
Einstein
control
died
of the
during
Union, are very much
1955, and his
autonomous
theory
in
of
India,
relativity
meaning
is
they have
used
the
for the
rights
time
to their
machine
own
test.
resources and control over their economy, cultural aspects, some laws, holidays, and also are entitled to collect their own taxes. Do the provinces in Pakistan also have this much freedom on what they do?
I thought I've had this conversation with you, but I guess maybe I had it with one of my other Indian chatters. But Khulasa, the short version is this is the biggest problem of Pakistan. That the local governments is discouraged. Local governance is discouraged, and it is because that at the time of partition, a lot of the people who were in charge of Pakistan, they maintained power by kind of essentially taking over the system as the British has left it. Now, the British had a very extractive system in place in India, in old India, in combined India. And the whole point of that system was to maintain control and to discourage people to get power locally and just work as a colonial power, centralized power. So in order to maintain power in Pakistan, this is exactly what the people who got into power here, this is exactly what they did. And so yeah, basically Pakistan kind of never really stopped being like a colony. It's just like it's Pakistani, the powerful in Pakistan, they operate Pakistan like a colony. Obviously, it's not as bad as like a place like North Korea or something, but this is really, honestly, the biggest reason why Pakistan faces the kind of problems that it faces. There are some benefits to having the kind of more centralized control that our Hukmran want to have, but it's just not a way to run a modern country. So that's a big part of why we suffer a lot because of this. It's also the we maintained mostly the provinces that the British were administrating under, and that was unnatural. I think by contrast, Nehru, for example, had very kind of communistic tendencies and stuff, so he really pushed for a lot of devolution of power and land reforms in India, which is I think has been to a great benefit to India. Unfortunately, Jinnah, first off, he only survived 1 year into Pakistan, so who knows what he had planned or whatever, you know. But and I honestly speaking, I don't think that. I think the whole Pakistan movement. This is my understanding of things. The whole Pakistan movement was basically, on some level, it was like a negotiation tactic that was being employed, but just the tactic kind of took on a life of its own, and it just happened that way, you know. And the formation of Pakistan, while you know there's a lot of lamentation about it, you know, like on your side of the border, the kind of, it was also the formation of Pakistan, in some sense, is also what a lot of the Indian leadership wanted, because Pakistan this way provided like a very effective buffer against Afghanistan, Iran, and the Soviet Union, you know, against Russia. So, God, I'm sorry, I'm just going all over the place. But yeah, sorry, I'm gonna cut back to the topic, and the topic was local governance and autonomy. And yeah, we don't have the kind of autonomy that we should have. And also, the provinces that we have are the ones that the British were using. This is not how it should be. We need to have a lot more provinces. We need to, like, all of Punjab is so diverse, both geographically and culturally, and it's just all lumped into like one big ass Punjab, you know. That's one thing. It's the same with KPK, which is our northern stuff. I mean, even though there's like KPK, and then there's Gilgit Baltistan, and then our version of Kashmir. But I think that even within the KPK that's left over there, there's a lot of diversity and a lot of geographical distinctiveness, along which these provinces need to be broken down further into sub provinces. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, this is the Nizam.
Pope Maseed says, yeah, I know the Indians had a state reorganization once which divided all the states based on cultural aspects. Like how Indian Punjab was divided.
Yeah, into, wait, what was it? It was Punjab, and it was what is the place? Not UP. What is? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. Yeah. Also, the biggest thing that worked in your favor is land reforms.
He says Haryana.
Yeah, Haryana. Land reforms is a huge thing. I think land reforms have really helped you guys a lot more in like the land reforms, as I understood it, that happened in India was specifically to break the landowner class and preventing them from gathering too much power, and that really needed to happen here as well. But the whole point is that because so a lot of people were afraid that this was gonna happen to them in India, and these were the kind of people who were courted in by the Muslim League to come, hey man, you know, like you know what, the wind is blowing towards land reforms after partition, and you guys should come to Pakistan, and we won't bug you about that stuff. So you can come and bring your money and bring your stuff here and set up shop and shit like that, you know. So yeah, matlab, you know, politics is a game of power and consolidation of power. So that is the kind of risk that they took at partition in order to make this shit happen. And yeah.
Einstein theorized that motion caused time to move differently, which meant that a clock moving would tick slightly faster than one that's just stationary. I think, For God's sakes, Jim, I'm a YouTuber, not a physicist. After a number of revisions, the DeLorean got brought in, as its design had an almost otherworldly feel. This also had inspiration from
Where's my
the
foot?
interface being based on the Time Machine film from the 1960s. This had the panels on the machine being green, red and yellow, with those colours also coming across to the panel in the car. The car was then going to be driven into the atomic bomb test, but this was
Pope Masid
eventually
says
removed
TBH
purely because of
partition
the
also
budget.
worked really
However,
well
you
to
can
weaken
catch a
India,
couple of
which was
nods to it
probably
as
in
the
British
van DeLorean's
interest.
first
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person, matlab, like, it's kind of like a stupid brain dead thing that people always say, okay, colonialism this and colonialism that. I feel like it's kind of like a dumb thing that people do all over the world to blame all problems on colonialism. It's just like kind of like a thought-killing device to say, oh, it's because of colonialism, But having said that, so that is my general stance, okay? But having said that, I do believe that at the end of the colonial period, all these European powers deliberately divided the territories that they were leaving in such a way that it would create conflict and prevent the colonies, the former colonies, from delay them recovering. And they did it here. They did it everywhere. They did it that's what Israel-Palestine is. Like, that's the British doing while they were leaving, And they did it everywhere. They've done it everywhere that they left. And all these powers did the same things. They did it in Africa. They did it in our part of the world. They did it with Israel-Palestine. They did it like in Southeast Asia. I believe that this is a deliberate thing that they did in order to keep because they had to recover, and they're like, yaar, agar inko humne अच्छा clean break दे दिया तो ये लोग तो हमें खा जाएंगे, तो नहीं, इनको लड़ा के छोड़ो, make them keep fighting, So yeah, I think deliberately this is the partition is definitely something that the British wanted. They wanted it so that you and I could keep fighting with each other. They wanted it this way. That's why, they did it in such a way that it's like, what is this Punjab ki partition, man? I mean, it's not by around any kind of geographical feature. If you look at a natural country is more likely than not built around a natural geographic boundary. Okay, like, how is Sindh partitioned? How is Punjab partitioned? Kashmir ko to chhod hi do na. Forget about Kashmir. Just look at Sindh and Punjab. What is this bullshit? Like, it's open fields, dude. Like, you can't, there's no natural border. It's bullshit, So yeah, they did it this way so that, you and I would keep fighting.
Pope Masid says, and they sent a person who had never been to India to make this important decision and gave him 6 months.
Yeah. But I think they knew exactly what they were doing when they sent him. Mountbatten tha, kaun tha? Main bhul raha hu. Kya plan kehte hain? Shit, I've forgotten his name. I've forgotten the guy's name. But yeah. Marshall bhi nahi tha. Kya tha? भूल चुका हूं मैं नाम.
Pope Masid says, yeah, they knew a proper boundary would have taken 3 years to draw.
No, dude. Listen. You and I can sit down and in 3 days draw a proper boundary. If we understand the principles behind nation building, okay? You draw a boundary for a natural state or a natural country or whatever along either geographical lines or around ethnic lines. Okay? कि अच्छा ये जो पंजाबी बोलने वाले हैं ये यहाँ रहते हैं, the people who speak Punjabi live here, the people who speak Baluchi live here, You know, so if you don't have a natural geographical boundary, you make a boundary around this, like the kind of people who live there and stuff like that. You know, it's easy. Dude, this is what I like. You know what? This recent war between India and Pakistan. You know, this is what I say. Everybody in power on both sides of the border from this last war, they got exactly what they wanted. Okay, the only people who lost in the last war that we had were you and me. Okay, everybody else, the terrorists, I'm sure that there was some Pakistani support for the terrorists. I'm not sure this was a Pakistani planned terror attack or whatever. Okay, but you guys, we support your separatists. You support our separatists. So there's obviously going to be क्या नाम है support. Okay. अब the जो भी कोई इस तरह के radical groups होते हैं, terrorist group है, when they do stuff like this, the whole point is to get a reaction. Okay, like that is what any terrorist group, any kind of, that's what they want. They want an escalation of hostilities. Okay, because that destabilizes people, and then because they're in a weaker position, right? A terrorist group or whatever. Okay, they're in a weak position. So their point is to make the strong people weak so that they get more of a chance to do what they want to do. Okay, so they wanted this conflict between us. So they won. Okay, on your side of the border, your Modi. Okay, he was his election year. Okay, a little war, like that's great for an election year. Okay, he got what he wanted. On our side of the border, हमारी side पे, like there was a very significant anti-army sentiment जो काफी अरसे से build हो रहा था. Okay, people were really kind of beginning. The army was really beginning to kind of be jittery about stuff, And then this happened, और उसकी वजह से overnight, because of what happened, the entire country forgot completely. मतलब evaporate हो गया ना सारा anti-army sentiment, pro-democratic sentiment जो यहाँ पे हो रहा था. Okay, so overnight सब खड़े हो गए आर्मी के पीछे. ठीक है, और फिर ये 15-20 दिन चली है, फिर खत्म हो गया है. अच्छा, कौन मरा है? अच्छा, अवाम मरी है. अच्छा, वो forget even us. Okay, forget the people of India, Pakistan. Okay, people outside got what they wanted. अच्छा, China got to understand. अच्छा, हमारे जो जहाज हैं वो इस तरह ऑपरेट करते हैं. हमारे जहाज Chinese जहाज थे. ठीक है, and the French got to understand. Acha, okay, our Rafale performs this way and stuff like that. They got their data. Everybody got what they wanted. Okay, except for you and me. हम मरे हैं. And I started saying this because it's exactly the same at partition. India Pakistan की partition हो, क्या नाम है, कुछ भी partition देख लो, ये Israel Palestine की partition हो, everybody gets what they want except for the people. Everybody, it's exactly the right thing. The people who did it exactly the right way for what they wanted to do. और हम भी बुद्धू हैं ना, अवाम मेरी साइड पे, आपकी साइड पे, जंग शुरू हुई और गालियां शुरू हो गई, और बस क्या नाम है, गालियां देख के खुश हो गए सब. अच्छा, your media though, I mean, I'm sorry, that's something very special by the way. Your media got what it wanted.
Poke Masid says Nahi Media To Hamsha Se Jokti.
But this is a difference, right? Like on our side of the border, like no, everybody completely understands. I mean, nobody, not even like a villager.
Masid says Indian military ko India K media ko ru na padha.
In Indian military को इंडिया के मीडिया को रोकना पड़ा था. हाँ. Yeah. But see, on our side of the border, right? Like we never believe the media. Okay, we've lived under this dictatorship, so we're kind of accustomed to. Half the things we're gonna hear on the news is gonna be lies. Okay, so we just know. Okay, and this is like even the stupidest villager, okay, knows this. Okay, but thankfully, I think we have some really brave kind of online journalists who do like good work. But yeah. Anyway.
Has a bumper sticker on it. This says, "One nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day." Also, a disclaimer, I keep saying nuclear wrong in every single video. I did used to do an impression of a Russian guy.
Says
I must have
TBH, I am more
nuclear
interested
weapons,
in
and
what's
since then
happening
it's stuck,
between
and I'm just
India
keep
and
ruining
China
my
RM.
videos even more and more. Do not watch.
Good. अच्छी बात है.
Your proposal acceptable.
At the end, when Muddy speeds Back to the Future, we
You know, honestly, China kind of plays its own game. Okay, China is this is what I've understood. मैं कौन सा यहाँ पे बैठ के, I'm not some political genius or whatever. This is just what I understood. Okay, what I kind of in my stupid way, okay, have kind of understood is China kind of doesn't want to deal with the rest of the world. Okay, China only deals with the rest of the world because it has to. Okay, so they kind of don't really care. Okay, but China has bigger problems. China has like 10-15 years left. China has its own problems. Like, honestly speaking, like America America by blockading China can really hurt it because China doesn't make its own fertilizer. But like all the rest of the world all combined, they can't really do shit to China. But not all. In the same way that, in the sense that, whatever problems that the rest of the world can cause China are very small compared to the problems that China is already facing. Okay, unless they really find a way out of their demographic situation. China, there are no young people in China. There's nobody soon. There won't be anybody left to buy shit, never let alone make shit. So even if they figure out how to run an economy on a decreasing population, they won't be able to solve consumption by themselves. So any problems that India or anybody else China, Taiwan, anybody else can cause for China are very small compared to the problems that China itself is in. So listen, all this shit, this is distractions. I don't know what's going on between China and India right now. Okay, I haven't been paying attention. I don't know what's going.
He says that's why they are probably making friends with India RN. We have a lot young people.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on. But India itself has its own particular kind of problems. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, I don't know what the latest is actually. Really, Pakistan, India ke darmiyan bhi, I don't know what's going on right now. But wait, what was I saying? I forgot what I was about to say. Sorry, I've completely forgotten what I was about to say.
can also
Yeah, this is what I was going to say. Okay, all this stuff, fighting between India, Pakistan, any kind of war that could happen between India and China, whatever. This is just stuff to distract people like you and me. Okay, that's all it really is from what's actually happening
Masid says India and
underneath.
China are getting along RN. We opened up trade and stuff. I think that is good for me at least.
Why is that good for you? You think you're gonna get employment in the Chinese games industry? अच्छी बात है, यही होना चाहिए man.
Says yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
Poke Masid says gotta work for Tencent.
You can work for Tencent sitting anywhere in the world, man. Tencent owns like like a lot of things. You can be working for Tencent and not even know that you're working for Tencent.
Poke Masid says finally TikTok will be unbanned.
Nahi, this is good. Please keep it. I'm happy that India has banned TikTok. I think we should also be banning TikTok. You guys are lucky.
Poke Masid says also I am more happy cause I wanted to go to China one day but cause of bad relations the flights were stopped and visa hard to get.
I know some people who are going to China to get like degrees and stuff. So I think that is probably the most viable way, unless like you're like setting up a factory or something.
to see the cinemas playing The Atomic Kid. According to the wiki, there were several other ideas that didn't make the cut, with Marty's actions drastically changing the 80s. Instead of coming home to where he pretty much left things, the entire planet would have hoverboards and flying cars. We all know from our own history we wouldn't get those until 2015, but his moves changed it to that. Now George was also going to be a famous boxer, which led out from him knocking out Biff after saving Lorraine. However, remnants of this plot line still remain in the film, with Marty carrying George's back garden. This then led into a deleted scene, and it would have Marty giving him boxing lessons and finally figuring out he was a lefty. Throughout the film, he writes with his right hand, but in the end, he punches with his left. The Better Health website did a big report about how kids used to be encouraged to write with their right because left-handedness was seen as being awkward. Most things were built with right-handers in mind, and there was a big push against this being adopted in the 50s. So George striking Biff with his left was finally him shrugging off the life he'd been bullied into and standing up for who he was in more ways than one. A Universal head Sid Sheinberg didn't like the title due to the word future being in it. He said they should change it to Spaceman from Pluto because reasons, I guess. Man wanted this.
My name is Darth Vader. I am an extraterrestrial from the planet Vulcan.
Changed to
I am Spaceman from Pluto.
But Spielberg did something that shut that idea down. He sent him a note saying, mate, What a great joke that was, eh? What a fucking great joke you did there, mate. Almost thought you were being serious, you fucking cunt. Which Scheinberg was way too embarrassed to fight back on.
He's made you look a right knob.
Now,
Hope
production
Receipts
for the
says, "I
film
have
was hit
applied
with a
for a
couple of
passport
snags,
too."
and I'm sure you all know the story about Eric Stoltz. This even got referenced recently.
Yeah, you should do that anyway.
We're talking about who starred in...
Go get a passport, go to Thailand.
All of them, and Eric Stoltz is not Marty McFly.
Then explain Marty McFly here.
Now what happened is that he was playing Marty, and Melora Hardin was playing Jennifer. So we could have had an alternate timeline with Jan from The Office, but in the end she got
Hope
let go
Receipt
too.
says also
Fox had
gotta go
actually
to
always
sleep.
been the first choice for Marty, but he couldn't make it.
Alright, man. It was nice of you to hang out with me. Take care of yourself. Good night.
Baxter was pregnant at the time, and this Fox needed to
Hope
appear in the
Receipt
show
says
more
nice
than usual.
drawing.
Stoltz
Thank you.
things weren't working, and on set he's
Hope
said to have
Receipt
been
says
very
good night.
difficult to work with.
Good night, friend.
Apparently refused to answer to anything other than Marty, and this was so bad that when he was told he'd been fired, Christopher Lloyd said, "Who's Eric? I thought he was called Marty." IMDb trivia also says that Tom Wilson, who plays Biff, almost got his collarbone broken during the lunchroom scenes. Tom asked him to tone it down, but Stoltz just kept going and he caused lots of difficulties. Everyone knew that he wasn't right for the role, and after 6 weeks of shooting, Baxter had returned to Family Ties. Stoltz was then called into a room and he was called in and told he wasn't right, and apparently Stoltz also agreed too. Hardin was then let go because she was too tall to play against Fox, and the producers had realized that size matters.
That's what she said.
Thus, they managed to work something out with Fox, but it still sounds like it was a really grueling shoot. Fox would film Family Ties in the day and then drive over to the set and work from 6 till 6. All the scenes shot in the daytime, they were done on the weekends, with everything working out alright in the end. Also, IMDb trivia says that Stoltz went on to play The Fly in The Fly 2, who was called Martin, so he went from playing Marty McFly to Martin the Fly. Ha Nice when they include a joke you can steal, and there's still a shot of Stoltz left in the film, but this own change in the timeline drastically changed the outcome. Anyway, that's the making of trivia, which takes us into the movie itself. Now let us go Back to the Future. That's the power of love. Now, a famous phrase in film is show, don't tell. Boiled down to its basics, it means that film's a visual medium, and it's often better to convey something with images rather than a character telling us what's happening. Now, why I'm telling you this and not showing you is to talk about the opening shot, which conveys so much information. It's one of the best openings to a film ever. Doc Brown's we begin looking at several clocks, which are all set to 7:50.
I love this film, man.
We learn that this was part of an experiment.
Perfect! My experiment worked! They're all exactly 25 minutes slow!
And one of the only clocks that's correct is the one on the floor, which is currently set to 8:18. This subtly gives the idea that Doc's been messing with time, and we also have two different time periods here. Now, as we move through the room, we see some decorative clocks, including one with a drunk man slumped up against it. This kind of reminds me of the homeless guy that Marty sees at the end when he finally returns back to the future.
He said it!
This guy is actually the character ex-Mayor Red Thomas, whose election trucks we see moving through the 50s. In the 80s, the mayor's Goldie Wilson, whose truck we also see moving through too, bringing these moments full circle. Shout out to Eric for his video on the deep dive for pointing out that the way the bum swigs the bottle here is also similar to what Lorraine does in the car later on with Marty. You also get a nod to Harold Lloyd's safety first when we see a small figure hanging from a clock. This is of course foreshadowing the moment in the climax where Christopher Lloyd hangs off the clock tower. Doing this ends up breaking the ledge, which is another cool detail that appears in the film. When Jennifer and Marty sit in front of it at the 10-minute 30 mark, we can see the ledge behind them is absolutely fine. However, in 1955, the dock ends up breaking it, which is something that then goes on to affect the future. Cut to the hour 41 mark, and we get a helicopter flying by and can see that the ledge has now been broken off. Now from this clock, we then go past one that has the word regulator on it, before then going down to some newspaper clippings. This says that the Brown Mansion was destroyed and that the estate was sold to developers. Bob Gale spoke about this on the commentary and said this was all sold off to fund his time travel research. Also, huge shoutouts to Mudrun on Reddit, who pointed out why the Doc's mansion might have burned down. Later on, after Doc uses his fire extinguisher, we can see that this leaves it almost completely empty. So man probably had an experiment that went haywire, but he'd overused the extinguisher and couldn't put it out. Safety first. And next we move down to photos of Edison and Benjamin Franklin, the two of which, well, one of which was a famous inventor. Franklin carried out an experiment with a kite in the wind, which was struck by lightning like what happens at the end. Now, later on, Doc can be seen talking to a picture, which he refers to as being Thomas. This is actually Thomas Edison, calling back to the photo that we see here. And next to them is also a picture of Einstein, who, as we mentioned, played a part in Doc's inspiration. On top of this was also Leopold Stawowski, who was also used as a way to style his look. Underneath this is the JVC camera that later gets used to film the first time travel attempt. Next to this is also a Burger King cup with wrappers just littering the room. Now when Marty ends up leaving Doc's lab, we can see his garage backs onto a Burger King restaurant, explaining why there's so many wrappers in the house. The TV is then turned on by one of the clocks, but this one has to have had the right time. This is like this purely to show us the report, and this is where we learn of the plutonium theft. Doc's been out and about and hasn't been home, hence why we then see the dog food piling up in an already full bowl. At this point we watch as Marty enters, and he rolls his skateboard over to the plutonium box. So all those shots, they tell us so much info that it's hard to argue how good this scene is. Now from this point we cut to an AMP interface, which we can see labelled CRM114. This is actually an artist Stanley Kubrick, who's used the number in a lot of his films, including Dr. Strangelove, where it was on the radio system. Blowing up the amp, my man's here to make an entrance, and it's at this point the film really gets going. As Marty skates outside, we see as he hitches a ride, and then travels through the town centre of Hill Valley. This shot is later repeated in 1955, which just goes to show how times change over the decades. If you've ever moved away from somewhere and then gone back, you'll have no doubt seen how even a couple of decades alter things. I love this place being a central location, as it perfectly demonstrates the differences between the 50s and 80s. Now as he goes down the main street, we can see there's two signs with Goldie Wilson's name on them, hinting at the character we're gonna meet later on. There's also lots of adult entertainment spots and theatres, and better than what it was like when Red Thomas was running it, mate. Also, I wonder if red and Goldie being colours shows that the mares have a theme to them, and maybe the guy with the adult theatres is called Blu-ray, eh? Because he sells adult movies Blu-ray, eh? Fuck's sake. Now the name Hill Valley, that was chosen because it's an oxymoron. That means it just sounds like your bog standard town where they cared so little about naming it they chose two things that don't even make sense. Down the line, I'll talk about how these shots are repeated through the rest of the trilogy, and yes, you're right, I will be covering all the films. If that's something you're interested in, then please smash the subscribe button, and I'll see you back in the future when I release them soon. Now driving the truck, we see a man turn around who's rocking what's totally not some Mountain Dew product placement. This is actually stunt coordinator Walter Scott, who put this scene together because the man's all about safety first. Now from here, Marty skates up to the school, where we can catch some graffiti on the wall. Next to a tree you can see Lorraine Dal Calvin, which foreshadows the fake name Marty uses with his mum Lorraine. I was wondering if this graffiti was from 1955, but that means the school wouldn't have been clean since then. Instead, I just think it's a little in-joke for when the set decorators were putting this less than pristine look together. After bumping into Principal Strickland, he says,
"Now let me give you a nickel's worth of free advice, young man. This so-called Dr. Brown is dangerous. He's a real nutcase."
Now, you might be wondering why a high schooler's hanging around with an old man.
Seat right on that stool, please. Sure.
Look, let me explain, Chris. You see, Bob Gale was speaking to the site Mental Floss, and he talked about how the pair met. He said, "For years, Marty was told that Doc Brown was dangerous, a crackpot, a lunatic. Marty snuck into Doc's lab and was fascinated by all the cool stuff that was there. When Doc found him there, he was delighted to find that Marty thought he was cool and accepted him for what he was. You see, Marty stayed with him because he got to use his guitar, and it's all just one big misunderstanding. The police are waiting for me outside, aren't they?" And the principal rattles off how he's just like his dad, and how no McFly ever amounted to anything.
Yeah, well, history is gonna change.
It's a nice little line of dialogue that then leads us into Marty's audition. Here they play The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News, with Huey himself playing the teacher carrying out the audition. Huey initially just wrote this song, but the creative team weren't exactly thrilled with it since it didn't really tie in with the movie. They said they needed one more that was in line with the plot, and after showing him the film, the band made Back in Time, which is another banger. Now on stage, we see Marty playing alongside a guy who looks a bit like Donny Tourette, but this is actually Michael J. Fox's guitar instructor. Behind the scenes shots of this have been shown on the Blu-rays, making a nice little cameo for the guy who helped him learn it. At the clock tower, Marty talks about how he's too scared to send his audition tape in, but Jennifer then drops this line.
It's like Doc's I know. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Which is something that appears throughout the film, with the person who relays the message getting the credit for it at different points.
You know, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Like I've always told you, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
It's lots of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff, with Doc Brown telling Marty, who then told his father, and then told him, bringing things full circle. Also, I love how Marty just checked out the girls that walked past him, and it's literally that mean with a man getting distracted.
Get out of here, kid. You got no future. I mean, I just don't think I can take that kind of rejection.
But this line about him having no future adds some subtext to the plot, as we're meant to worry that Marty might not get back.
What, right here, right now in the cafeteria? What if she said no? I don't know if I could take that kind of a rejection.
Around the area, you might have also noticed that there's businesses closing down, and it seems like it's a dying city centre. On the bench, we can catch a sign for Zales Jewelers, which says that it's now in the Twin Pine Mall. This shows how the businesses are moving up there, and it sets up one of the main locations that appears in the story. On top of this, we can also catch two women petitioning to save the clock tower. This headline documents how it was struck by lightning, with one of the women telling him it got struck in 1955 and stopped at that exact moment. This gives Marty all he needs to know, so he can use this info to power up the time machine. However, Marty's distracted by a 4x4, which is what he later ends up getting bought by his parents.
Someday, Jennifer. Someday.
Marty's dream of taking Jennifer up to the lake in that truck is something that he gets to do at the end, but here it seems like it's just a pipe dream. Just above the women, we can also see a sign that says Ask Mr. Foster, travel since 1888. This shop's clearly been around for a long time, and we can also catch it at the hour 41 mark in 1955. Though you can't see it here, we have other shots of the sign for this that says time to travel, which is it's a little time travel joke that. At this point, Jennifer writes down her number, which begins with 5555, indicating that it's completely fictional. Stop ringing it. Huge shoutouts to Webborn on Reddit for pointing out that Doc Brown's number is Klondike 54385, with K and L both being on the 5-digit, meaning the number is actually 5552. Also, as Marty puts it away, you can see the theater behind him showing Orgy American style. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to watch us break down that as well. Shabow! At this point, Marty hitches his way back home to Lion Estates, where we see the outside of his house. Later on, we get a better shot of this, where Biff hasn't smashed George's car like it's a like button. Now, a cool detail back in 1955 is that Marty comes across a billboard of what these homes will look like. Placing it next to the shot we see at the end, it actually lines up really nicely with the way the real house looks. George's car being wrecked is also juxtaposed nicely at the end, as here Biff crashes it, whereas there he's cleaning it. Hey, and look.
Now Biff, I want to make sure that we get 2 coats of wax this time, not just one. Don't con me.
You look closely at where Biff's waxing yet, you can see he hasn't even finished the first coat up yet, and he's just putting it on now. You don't try to con me, Biff. Now inside the house, George is a lot more like his 1950s version, with him having the slick back greaser hair and pocket protector. This shows he never really grew out of that state and is sort of just trapped there being a weak man. Also here we can see that George is wearing glasses, whereas in the alternate 85 he doesn't have them anymore. According to IMDb Trivia, this is because he could afford to get contact lenses, so instead he just wears them. Eric also pointed out that we can see he's got grey hair, whereas in the earlier versions the slick back look makes it seem darker. This is given by the grease in the product, which in itself was a big thing in the 50s. Now Biff blames him for not saying the car had a blind spot and that he spilt beer all over himself, which means McFly's gotta pay his cleaning bill. You also have some really good lines here that pay off much later when we get to the diner.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Doesn't do till Monday.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home?
Think, McFly. Think.
Hey, think, McFly.
Think. I gotta have time to get them retyped. Do you realize what would happen if I handed my reports in your handwriting? I gotta have time to recopy it. You realize what would happen if I hand in my homework in your handwriting? I'll get fired. I'll get kicked out of school. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? Would you?
Of course not, Biff.
Would you?
Well, now, of course not,
No,
Biff. I wouldn't want
no.
that to happen. Now, look, I'll
What are you looking at, butthead?
So his report's on up tonight, and I'll run him on over first thing tomorrow, all right? Okay, Biff. Well, I'll finish that on up tonight, and then I'll bring it over first thing tomorrow morning.
Hey, not too early. I sleep in Saturday. Oh, McFly, your shoes untied. Hey, not too early. I sleep in Sunday. Oh, McFly, your shoes untied. Don't be so gullible, McFly. Don't be so gullible, McFly. I don't want to see you in here again.
George stands and admits that he's not good at confrontation, and during this we see his fist clenching up. This is almost like he's trying to throw a punch and thinking back to what he should have done when he was a teen. Now, the car being totaled means Marty can't take the trip, and George's weaknesses are affecting his life too. From here we cut to George eating a box of peanut brittle, which looks worse than some of the videos we put out. Now, there was actually a deleted scene in the film where he bought a case that he didn't want from a neighbour. This was to show that he would just do what he was told, but it was already spelled out in the prior scene, so they ended up cutting it. At this point they start watching a show, which is something that also pops up during the 50s. Lorraine ends up slamming down a cake, which is supposed to celebrate her brother getting out of jail. Unfortunately, Man didn't end up making it out, and we meet this character back in the past.
You're my Uncle Joey. Better get used to these bars, kid.
Obviously, the bars, oh well you get that, but I love how he's wearing black and white as well, just like a prison uniform. Now, Marty's family are kinda down on their luck, with his brother working in a fast food restaurant and also taking the bus. At the end, this is the complete opposite, with George's change affecting the whole bunch. Lorraine then recounts how she and George met, with both the Bull and Thunderstorm also getting mentioned.
And it was then that I realized that I was going to spend the rest of my life with him.
And take notice of the life box there too, with a game playing off the line that we've just heard. Cut to Marty's room, and next to the clock we can also see Pepsi Free. This was a version of the drink that didn't have any caffeine in it, and it's what Marty later tries to order at the diner.
Right, give me a Pepsi Free.
You want a Pepsi, pal? You're gonna pay for it.
As the camera pulls out as well, we can see a big version of the photo that Marty later has of his siblings. Now at this point he travels to the Twin Pine Mall, which leads us in to watch the most famous Easter egg of all time. Doc says,
Old man Peabody on all of this.
And when Marty travels back to the 50s, he knocks over one of the pine trees. This is later revealed to be at the Peabody farm, which we can see by the mailbox outside. When Marty returns here at the end, we can see the mall's now called Lone Pine Mall, and this is due to Marty knocking over one of the trees in the past. Peabody's son is also called Sherman, which I found out from the making of notes. This is a nod to a big show. 1959's Peabody's Improbable History that involved Sherman and his dog Mr. Peabody. They travel through time to get to certain points in history, and according to the trivia on the 2014 film, the characters also travel back at 88 miles per hour. Haven't seen it, but that's a pretty cool nod, and Bob Gale also talked about how on October 26, 85, how people showed up to the mall expecting Marty to arrive. He didn't, and sometimes patience doesn't pay off. Now, Doc also explains that DeLorean needs 1.21 gigawatts of power before Einstein arrives at 121. According to IMDb, gigawatts was mispronounced from gigawatts, and this was due to a science official the creative team hired basically just saying it that way. Einstein getting sent through times, also similar how dogs were used on space missions in early orbits to test whether flights were safe for humans. After sending him, Einstein's then return, and this leaves the car completely covered in ice. I feel like this might be down to it going against entropy, which creates a frosted effect all around the car. Something similar was seen in Tenet when an explosion was reversed, which then created ice. Doc also reveals what happened the day he thought of time travel.
I was standing on the edge of my toilet hanging a clock. I slipped, hit my head on the edge of the sink, and when I came to, I had a revelation.
And this kind of reminds me of what happened with Isaac Newton when he discovered gravity. Later on, when Marty arrives at his house, we can also see he's got a big bandage on his head from it. Now, here we get first
I'll be right back.
Referenced in Avengers Endgame. As I'm sure you know, there is a bit about how Back to the Future 2 is a bunch of bullshit, but here we also see the plutonium's red fluid. This is what the Pym particles were designed on, and it's not the only thing here that would pay off down the line. Doc talks about how he wants to travel into the future and see who ends up winning the World Series. Back to the Future 2 of course involves the future, and it also has a big plot centered around sports games. Either way, Doc Brown starts to rattle off his plans for the video, and we can see he's got a red notepad in his pocket. This is actually a one for Gremlins, which Steven Spielberg also helped produce. Now at this point, the terrorist shows up, which leads Brown to say he doesn't know how they found him.
Oh my god.
They found me. I don't know how, but they found me.
But it's probably because you got your name printed on the side of the van, mate. Anyway, it leads to him dying and Marty driving off. Hitting 88 miles per hour, we watch as he's taken back to the past to play some shitty games that suck ass. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Now, after crashing into the farm, Peabody thinks it might be an alien, and the DeLorean was actually chosen because it looked a bit like a spacecraft. Shoutouts to users The Little Man on Reddit for pointing out that the DeLorean's designer also gets a little nod in the credits. There we can see he's credited as being a time travel consultant, which is a nice little joke if you stick around and watch them. Now the speedometer was also changed too, with it getting a top speed of 95 instead of the original 85. This means that they can show it goes up to 88 rather than just hitting 85 and then not going past it. Marty then ends up travelling to Lyon Estate before he wanders into town. Here we see a poster at the cinema with Ronald Reagan's name on it, which later gets referenced when talking about the president.
Who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
The scene was actually shot to resemble a Twilight Zone episode, Where Is Everybody?, which has a man wandering into a town square looking confused. Both were shot on the same backlot at Universal, with the creative team deliberately giving a nod to it. Now here we catch several things we saw in 1985, including the Texaco garage and the clock tower, which now works. Along with this, we also have the sign for Hill Valley, which popped up at the 6 minute and 37 mark in 1985. Yeah, the slogan is a nice place to live, whereas in the past or the future, I'm guessing it's not because that's been taken away. Now, at the diner, Marty meets his dad and Biff, along with Billy Zane, who plays the character Match. Man doesn't get any lines in the film, but he carries around a matchstick in his mouth, which makes him look cool, so I might start doing it too. We also meet Goldie, who's inspired to be mayor, but since it happened anyway, he would have done this without Marty. Now, at this point, Marty realizes his dad was a peeping Tom, which is a bit weird, but either way, he ends up getting hit by his granddad's car, which means that he swaps places with George. He says,
Stella! Another one of these damn kids jumped in front of my car!
Which makes me think that he might have hit George before. Woken up by his mother, he thinks it's all just been a bad dream, but it's your worst nightmare, mate, cause your mum's trying to fuck you. That's right, baby, it's an incest story. Ow! And she calls him Calvin Klein because that's what was stitched into his underwear, which was the fashion at the time. In the translated versions, they changed this to Levi Strauss in Spain, with it being Pierre Cardin in France because Klein wasn't known outside of the US. And Lorraine, she's a bit full on, so you can see how she would have wooed a pushover like George. Girls taking cheeky little looks, and you can even catch her in the mirror peeping at Marty as he goes to put his pants on. Around the table, they roll in the television, with this dinner echoing the one that the family had before. This is showing the same episode of The Honeymooners, which also aired during 1955. After being freaked out by his mum pitching his leg, he ends up leaving, and we then get this line.
You ever have a kid who acts that way, I'll disown you.
Now after he heads out to Doc Brown's manor, we see the garage before then panning up to the bigger house. Inside, Man's got a different dog, with this one being named after Copernicus. Doc's also rocking a mind-reading device, but there's actually the possibility that this might work.
Come here from a great distance. You want me to buy a subscription to the Saturday Evening Post? You want me to make a donation to the Coast Guard Youth Auxiliary?
For distances, Marty's travel from the future, and the Saturday Evening Post's what Marty used to read the date on. As for the Coast Guard, Man's rocking a life preserver, and he explained he was a sailor to not get any suspicion. So maybe it does work, but either way, he doesn't buy Marty's from the future.
Class of 1984.
Pretty mediocre photographic fakery. They cut off your mother's hair.
As we know, the photo starts to fade as time changes, with his brother slowly disappearing as the past starts to alter. Also, if you zoom in on the photo, you can see his brother's hair's indeed starting to fade, which is a really cool detail. The doc then talks about Ronald Reagan and asks if Jane Wyman's the first lady. However, by 1955, Reagan was married to Nancy, so the timing of this, it is a bit off. Reagan, however, really loved this line, and when he was watching it, he asked them to replay the scene. Ronald was such a big fan of the movie, he even quoted it during his State of Union address.
Never has there been a more exciting time to be alive. A time of rousing wonder and heroic achievement. As they said in the film Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
After revealing he knows about the flux capacitor, we see his doc starts to believe him, and they drive to where the DeLorean's hidden out. I love the eeriness of this entire scene, and it then leads into them replaying the tape of the time machine. Doc then asks what he's wearing.
Wow, this is a radiation suit.
Of course, because of all the fallout from the atomic wars.
This of course comes in the wake of the invention of the atomic bomb, and there was worry that it would lead to more and more wars. When first exiting the car, Marty asks if Doc's got a DeVoe suit, who were a band in the 80s known for wearing them on stage. Brown then says,
No wonder your president has to be an actor. He's got to look good on television.
This was actually a little joke about JFK, who in the debates was said to look so good that it helped him get elected. Realizing he can't generate the power to send him back due to the lack of plutonium, the pair then realize they can use lightning to send him back to the future. Although they want Marty to lie low, they realize he can't because he's slowly being erased. Traveling to the high school, we see it before the 80s hit, and it ended up getting covered in graffiti. Huge shout out to Tokyo No on Reddit for pointing out that when they first see George, we can also see a poster with Ron Woodward on it. This is a nod to Ronald T. Woodward, who worked as a key grip on this and the other movies. Now that the school's pretty much the same, there's one key difference we see in the ball later on. The gym is different to the one Marty auditioned in, but there is a little poster that points this out. Earlier in the movie, when we first met Strickland, you can see a poster up behind him talking about the new gym. There's also a guy who puts a "Kick Me" sign on George's back, who later tries to cut in and take Lorraine from him. Still though, he stands up to him too, bringing things full circle from here when he also got bullied by him. Marty then tries to introduce Lorraine to him, and Doc is like, "Fucking hell, mate, your mum thinks you're the most handsomest boy in the world, and not in the same way that my mum thinks I'm the most handsomest boy in the world." Realizing that the enchantment under the sea dance will be a good place to hook them up, the rest of the movie then all builds towards that. Marty goes to George in the cafeteria, and look at this guy over George's back. Keeps bloody looking at the camera, and that's why you're not a famous actor now. Either way, George refuses to share his stories with Marty because he worries that if he showed them to people, then people wouldn't like them. This is of course similar to Marty, who's also in the same predicament in that he refuses to send his tape to the record label. There was actually a scene in which Marty would put his tape in an envelope, but in the end he'd just leave this on the dresser. This was deleted, but you can actually see this envelope at one point in the film. At the hour 47 mark, we see Marty leaving his room, and in his hand he's carrying the envelope. This was meant to show that Marty had a change of heart, and in the end he was gonna send it off. Now Marty ends up stepping in to stop Biff harassing his mother.
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
This line was actually improvised by Wilson, who got really into the character by channeling his own life. Everyone describes Tom as being a nice guy in real life, with him being a far cry from how he acts with Biff. However, Wilson was actually bullied badly in school, and he said he channeled this into Biff to make him the big butthead he is. Now, Biff Tannen was given that surname after Ned Tannen, who at one point was the head of Universal. And the next scene, we get this line from George.
But I can't go to the dance. I'll miss my favorite television program, Science Fiction Theater.
And this is actually a little meta joke, because the show had an actor called Michael Fox in it. I don't know if you know, mate, but when registering with SAG, you have to submit a unique name in order to not cause confusion with credits. This Michael added in the J, with this being a little nod to the actor in that.
Science Fiction Theater.
That night, Marty ends up going to his dad in the suit, which is when he puts on music to wake him up. This has the name Edward Van Halen on it, and this is because the band Van Halen refused to lend their name in the movie. Eddie didn't mind though, and he gave permission to use his name, and apparently the licks we hear are performed by him. Now you might also catch there's a hairdryer on his belt, which he uses like a gun during a deleted scene. According to IMDb trivia, this was something Doc left in the car, but it was never addressed, so they just cut that bit out. They were also going to have Marty knock George out with chloroform, which explained why he slept in so much that he missed school the next day. Now that has George going to the diner, where he orders a milk and make it chocolate. Throughout the film, we learn this is called Lou's Diner, and in 1985, Lou still keeps ownership. Over there it's called Lou's Aerobics Center, showing how he ended up changing the business. Now guess what, mate, I've had a cold again, so I've been recording chunks of this video at different points. Forgot to point out that when Marty goes to pay for the coffee, we can also see he puts a guitar pick on the counter, showing he carries one at all times. That's back in the video though, because of the magic of editing, and outside the diner we can also see a sign with some records on it. This is advertising the Ballad of Davy Crockett, who gets several nods throughout the film. Upon entering the diner, the song can be heard in the background, and Lorraine's brother also wears a raccoon skin hat. This is building off the back of the Davy Crockett craze, which was a big thing throughout the whole 50s. Now from here we see George swaggering about as he asks Lorraine out. A lot of his mannerisms were based on the Nutty Professor, not that one, the one with Jerry Lewis that was released in the 60s. They gave a direct nod to that with the white jacket and the way George dances by himself being in line with it. Guy's so nervous, he says density instead of destiny, but the wooing's broken up once more by Biff. Marty ends up saving the day, inventing skateboards, and making his mum fancy him even more. Several of the moments here would later be riffed on in other movies, with them doing a lot of it beat for beat down the line. I'll talk about that more when we cover those films though, but it always ends with Biff getting smashed like it's a like button. Now back at Doc's, we see as he's trying to watch the end of the tape, but he refuses to hear about what happens next. However, as we know, he'll eventually play it, which leans in with his acceptance that it's okay to change things and just say what the hell. Now we see he's mapped out a model of Hill Valley, which would later be referenced in Loki when Obi does the same thing. For the clock tower, we can see that he's using one of his own wristwatches, which has a time set to 10:04. That's because that is the time that the lightning strikes, and it shows that the man's got some nice attention to detail. Now you might also notice that just before he points to the clock tower head, that we can see he's got a wristwatch on both arms. This was done to show how obsessed with time that he was, and I think it's a really cool detail that just helps to add into the character. With a little wind-up car that pops up in the franchise down the line, we see as this ends up crashing into the theatre down the road. This is something that Marty does at the end in real life because obviously he didn't have the room to hit 88 and then hit the brakes. Lorraine then arrives and asks him to the dance, with Doc pulling a fuck's sakes face throughout. Now one of the major questions people have about the movie is how don't Marty's hit and then hit the brakes? Lorraine then arrives and asks him to the dance, with Doc pulling a fuck's sakes face throughout. Now one of the major questions people have about the movie is how don't Marty's parents remember who he is?
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
Bob Gale eventually explained it to the Hollywood Reporter and asked them if they remembered a kid that they met for 8 days at 17. Do you remember someone you met on holiday for a week? And chances are that you'd probably struggle. Gale then said that they'd have a bit of a hazy memory, and 25 years later without a photo, it wouldn't really connect. Now cutting across to the clock tower, we then get this line.
Are you sure about this storm?
These whacking weathermen predict the weather, let alone the future.
This actually plays up in part 2 when we have the weather running on cycles, meaning that the weatherman is finally able to predict it. Other aspects that pay off down the line are set up here too, with Marty writing a letter to Doc. This is then put together by Doc, and part 2 ends with Doc sending Marty a letter coming directly from the past. Everything's kept under wraps literally, and we even catch Doc Brown bribing a police officer to keep things hush-hush. Anyway, jump to the enchantment under the sea dance, and we see Marty nervously waiting outside for George to show up. However, I don't even think Man had to intervene, because Lorraine realizes it's wrong when she kisses her son, which is a bit gross, mate, but you dodged a bullet. Aaliyah Thompson, she said that she kept this dress, and one day her daughter Zoe wore it on Halloween. Zoe's often been said to look a lot like her mum, and this Lorraine cosplay probably went down a storm. According to the behind the scenes trivia, they also played a little prank on Michael J. Fox at this point, as they had him doing a spit take, but they swapped it out for real alcohol. Man ended up drinking it anyway, and then doing the spit take, but the scene can be seen on the outtakes where he looks a bit shocked. Now George saves the day, and Marty's enlisted in the band, with him still having to play the song so his parents get together.
Marvin, you gotta play. See, that's where they kiss for the first time on the dance floor. They can't kiss, they can't fall in love, and I'm history.
Really love how they use the term I'm history there, and as we see the band's called Marvin Berry and the Starlighters. As we learn his cousin's Chuck Berry, aka the father of rock and roll, and Marvin makes a call to him after Marty plays Johnny B. Good. Marty even gets a song credit in the credits, which I'm not sure about the optics on that, mate, but we can also see the drummer playing a swing style since rock and roll drumming hadn't been popularized yet. Originally, this was gonna lead to the dance turning to a riot, which would then have police showing up. IMDb trivia states Marty would also tell Doc the secret ingredient in Coca-Cola, which would then cause history to change. Upon arriving back to the future, everything would run on Coca-Cola, and we discovered Doc had invented pretty much everything and had used the drink to make money. Marty also plays a Gibson ES345, which wasn't actually brought out until 1955, but the movie's so good that I'm gonna let it slide, mate. I'm gonna let it slide this one time. Although the school doesn't necessarily jive with the guitar shredding, George has become popular now, with students even telling him he should run for class president. The whole school love him, and Marty tells Lorraine his true name, which he says is nice, but not nice enough to name your firstborn after him, eh? Now when they're in the street, Doc runs to the back of the shot while Marty stays in the foreground. This composition is used throughout the film at several points, with Doc and George being the ones to do it. Symbolically, this could show that Doc's almost like a father to Marty, with these moments all mirroring each other. The Doc says Marty has
Exactly 7 minutes and 22 seconds.
Which is a really cool detail because from that point when Marty travels back, it's exactly 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Climbing up the clock tower, he's then scared by one of the statues, which were originally made for the 1982 film Cat People. Here we also see lightning in the clouds above them, which had to be done with models, and this was due to CGI not being advanced enough to pull it off. Lighting fiber wire, they were able to capture the effect, and they also used to McBride to create the wind during these moments. Anyway, Marty ends up driving to the spot, while Doc desperately tries to reconnect the wires. The DeLorean at this point doesn't start, and Marty flicks the headlights on and off to give the Morse code for SOS. Now there are a few times I'll be back in time. The DeLorean had its own sentience, and it refused to start up at this moment. It said that it's like the TARDIS, in which it was saving it until the right moment, and if that's what you want to believe, mate, good for you, and that's the time I'll be back in time. The Doc sliding down from the clock tower is the only scene that appears in all 3 films. This was performed by stuntman Bob Yerkes, who also got paid for them without doing any extra work. Anyway, Marty arrives back in the 80s, moments before Doc Brown was killed. Watching the terrorists arrive, Marty's unable to start the car, and thus he runs after them all, but he shows up too late. Doc's gunned down, and I love the way Marty goes to open his mouth to say no, but his past self says it for him. It's revealed that Doc ended up wearing a vest, and in the end, it's all fine and dandy, mate. Returning home, we see as Doc goes into the future, with him then travelling out to the year 2015. Waking up in a similar position to how he was earlier in the movie, we hear Back in Time over the radio, and we see him coming across his new life. Man's having croissants for breakfast, he works in an office, and his mum and dad are looking completely banging. Lorraine's lost weight, and it apparently took 3 hours in the makeup chair to make the couple look elderly. George ends up getting the first copy of his book as well, and this is titled A Match Made in Space. On the cover, we can see Marty's yellow hazmat suit, and he's bringing a man and woman together who are sitting in their bedclothes. You get that one, mate, you know what that means, and we see outside as Jennifer arrives. For the sequel, they had to reshoot the whole bit because Jennifer ended up being played by Elizabeth Shue. Sadly, Claudia Wells' mother was diagnosed with cancer, and thus she went to care for her instead of taking on the role. Originally, we were going to have George flicking through a yearbook from the 50s, and at this point he'd see Marty in the crowd. Man then said, "Nah, it couldn't be, but it is," which was going to be the line that then ended the film. However, they wanted to tease something else, and thus they went in this direction. On top of the car, we can also see a Mr. Fusion, which was also used years before in the movie Alien. Doc Brown powers up the car by taking things out of the trash, and we can see a can of Miller High Life. Huge hitouts to Everlist Cool on Reddit for pointing out that this was known as the champagne of beers. I noticed that earlier in the film when Biff grabs a can from the fridge, that this is just a can of your bog standard Miller Lite. This George, he's now living the high life and drinking a delicious can of Miller High Life, sponsors of the channel. Ciao! When the scene was shown to audiences, it was displayed in black and white because ILM hadn't finished the effects. Still though, the audience kept cheering, and it made the execs realize they had a major hit on their hands. Thus they moved the release date forward, and this only gave the production team 9 weeks to finish. It was a rush, but they got through it and managed to get it out back in time. Ow! The movie's obviously had an insane legacy, and I'm sure you're well aware of how big it was. Both Zemeckis and Gale have retained the rights, and both have stated they'll not authorize any sequels or remakes as long as they're alive, which, don't challenge Hollywood with that, mate, you know they've got the snipers. Either way, this movie held the record for staying at number 1 for 3 months, making it one of the most successful films of all time. Would of course go on to spawn 2 successful sequels, and I think it's one of the best trilogies ever. Love the posters as well, mate, and I feel like trilogies should have poster themes just like this, because look how good it looks. I bloody love it. And I hope you've loved it too, and we will be back with Back to the Future Part 2. Spending 3 months at the top of the box office, a sequel was put into production faster than 88 miles per hour, with both Fox and Lloyd signing on instantly. According to IMDb Trivia, Fox saw the To Be Continued, which was added to the VHS of the first one, and immediately rang his agent to make sure he was included. That's now since been removed, but it did tease at the studio's confidence in the franchise. You have to remember, this was a time before studios announced 800 movies in a shared universe before they'd even made the first one, and thus this was a big thing for fans of the film. Meeting back up with screenwriter Bob Gale, Robert Zemeckis hit the ground running, but instantly they were filled with regret. Realizing they left Jennifer in the car at the end of the first one, they knew they'd have to come up with a story that involved her too. You can kind of tell that they wanted her out the way as soon as we hit 2015, as she's shoved out the way, then gets picked up, goes back to the 80s, and then gets shoved out the way again. Neither of the creators had actually ever planned a sequel, and that line about the kids was supposed to just end that movie with a joke. So getting her out of the way became very important to them, and it does kind of slow down the pacing of the film. Now, though the future seemed like the next logical step, Gale took other approaches in the early drafts. The first one was going to take place mainly in the late 60s, with Lorraine as a flower child protesting the war. George was also going to be working at Berkeley, with him being a professor that specialised in literature. The first film ended with his debut book getting published, which had many wondering why it took so long. George had obviously been desperate to be a science fiction writer, so this helped to explain why he only dropped his first one in the 80s. Although Zemeckis was working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he started to come up with his own ideas. Zemeckis thought they could just revisit the first film and show the events from another angle. Now, in our first video, we talked about the issues with Eric Stoltz, who was originally in the role of Marty. The casting curse carried over to this too, with Crispin Glover refusing to sign on. On the first film, he disagreed about the ending, which painted wealth as leading into happiness.
The reason that I didn't end up being in the film, it's more complex than this, but I was asking questions that the producer's director didn't like.
Glover took issue with the prize at the end being a truck when he thought that love should be the film's message. He thought that morally this taught the wrong lessons, but reluctantly shot it after being shot down. According to Glover, this led to friction with Zemeckis, and by the time the second film rolled round, this all spilled over. Glover apparently wanted $1 million for his role, and after this was denied, the role was then recast. In the film, we see Jeffrey Wiseman, who's been done up to look like Glover, with them also employing archival footage to help beef up the role. Glover has denied that the dispute was over pay and said he only got offered $125,000.
What happened in the negotiation was I actually wanted to be in the film, but the offer was less than half of what Leah Thompson and Tom Wilson, who had similar sized roles.
Sure, yeah.
And it wasn't fair.
According to Collider, he's refused to attend any cast meetings, with him solely placing the blame on Bob Gale. Collider have said that Gale doesn't know why it's falling on him, as both Zemeckis and Spielberg were involved with the recast.
There are negative things that have been said to me and then about me on the Blu-rays that are not true. And
a commentary, really?
Yeah. He said things that are like, I haven't listened to it all in completion myself, but I've had people come up and say, "Did this, and this?" I said, "Where did you hear that?" And they said, "On the commentary on the Blu-ray for Back to the Future." And it's always from him. It's not from Robert Zemeckis. It's not. I mean, Steven Spielberg doesn't comment at all.
No.
but
anything.
Bob Gale still is. That's his main career at this point.
Either way, this eventually led to a lawsuit, with Glover saying they used his likeness without getting his permission. This entire thing was resolved outside of court, but it's been a major turning point in actors' likeness rights. SAG contracts now make it so you can't use an actor's likeness without at first at least getting their consent. Now, whether they agreed with him or not, I think the idea of wealth is something that the film very heavily grapples with. The Sports Almanac is something Marty wants to use to make money, but in the end, it just causes lots of issues. So though Glover didn't appear in the film, you could argue there was some influence over the things he brought up last time. Now, on top of this, Claudia Wells left the film too, which meant they had to reshoot the opening with Elizabeth Shue. More like Elizabeth reshoot. Anyway, Wells was more to do with personal issues, with her actually voluntarily leaving the role. Unfortunately, her mother was ill with cancer, and Wells chose to look after her instead of being in the film. Wells ended up providing a voice for the Back to the Future game though, and in the end, it's all Wells and done. Now, because of the issues with Glover, they were hit with a snag, but in many ways it helped to develop the script. Killing George, he could be absent from the alternate timeline and thus not have to appear after his scene early on. This would make Biff seem even more sinister and give Lorraine way more to do. To keep production costs down, they also shot it back to back with Part 3, and thus they figured out how to excise George from the plot without causing issues. So off they were to 2015 for Part 2, the land of hoverboards and flying cars. Now, so obviously none of this shit happened, but how did they get it all so wrong? You should be ashamed of yourself. Absolutely ashamed.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
Well, Blade Runner, right, that actually played a big part with them basing the technology of what was in that. Blade Runner is, of course, set in 2019, so just dial it back 4 years, mate, and you get the idea. Zemeckis actually said at the time he was worried about the future because he knew deep down they'd make inaccurate predictions. On the 30th anniversary of the Blu-ray releases, though, they actually made it sure, and in the end, they explained it all. Titled Doc Brown Saves the World, it features a message explaining what happened. This had the doc saying that he travelled out to 2040 and discovered something wrong in the tech of the past, or the future at the time. Hoverboards and dehydrated food made everyone overweight, and on top of this, the world itself had ended.
Why?
Well, because the Mr. Fusion, the bloody Mr. Fusion, that had a glitch that caused a nuclear holocaust that destroyed the planet. Thus he ended up going back to 2015 and stopped all this stuff from ever being invented. So in the end, that's why we don't have it now, and I'd actually do quite like that they went and cleared that all up. Anyway, that's all the making of trivia that you need to know. Now let's break down Back to the Future 2, Electric Boogaloo. Now, the movie begins on October 26, 1985, with a shot-for-shot remake of how the original movie ended. We place these scenes together so you can see how they line up, and it was obviously due to the whole Jennifer recasting thing. Obviously, they're not going to get everything back on because it's so difficult to recapture these moments perfectly. If you're going to jump over to this immediately from that, stuff will stick out like Lorraine's breasts.
What?
But on the whole, they do get it pretty close. However, a couple of cool little details that I noticed here are that the license plate on the Toyota changes in the second film. Originally, it was 2EZP916, whereas here it's 2BAC860. I was wondering if the 2BAC was a reference to this being the second Back to the Future, but unfortunately I couldn't find anyone on the commentary confirming it. However, I think that's the case. Now, in case you missed our last breakdown, we also see Doc Brown going through the trash and can catch a can of Miller High Life. This was known as the champagne of beers, and it was supposed to show George had gone up in the world, as before this, the can Biff grabbed was just your bog standard Miller Lite. We also see the Mr. Fusion on top of the car, which was a prop that also showed up in Alien. Later on, when we get to the future, you can also catch Fusion Industries in the back alley. As the DeLorean reverses out, we can also see it's got a barcode for the license plate, and they also add in a scene of Biff spotting the DeLorean take off. Now, for the title sequence, we get a point of view shot for what's likely meant to be the car moving through the clouds. According to the good folks at IMDb, this was originally shot for a film called Firefox. That was starring none other than Clint Eastwood, which was a name Marty uses in Part 3 when he travels to the past. Later on, when we see Biff in the hot tub, we can also catch him watching a fistful of dollars. This foreshadows what happens in Part 3, as Marty uses the same trick here in the shootout with Beefheart Tannen. Amongst the names, you'll also see Billy Zane, who returns once more for the role of Match. For that movie, he wasn't really a known actor, but for this film, he'd established himself a lot. Still though, he decided to return to the movie, and even though he knew it'd be a small role, he did it because this helped to build his name. As the car comes in, they pass by the sign for the courthouse square, with this apparently being a nightmare to assemble.
Why?
We stopped asking that, I'll tell you. Back when they filmed the first movie, they built it as the pristine 1955 version first. They then shot those scenes and messed up the set so that they could then shoot the stuff for the beginning and the end. However, when they went to shoot part 2, they had to match it to be the same as the first film, and according to the wiki, it cost them more to rebuild it than what it would have cost to build it all from scratch. The courthouse, of course, appears throughout the trilogy, with it being a landmark that they had to style and rebuild several times over. Now, something else that fits the Blade Runner aesthetic is the rain that's constantly beating down on the car. LA, lovely LA, it's meant to be a paradise where the beer flows like wine and the sun never stops shining. Blade Runner had it pouring to show how much humans had affected the planet, whereas here, it's controlled by the weatherman. This was meant to poke fun at a line in part 1 when Doc Brown thought that a storm wasn't coming.
Are you sure about this storm?
This working weatherman predict the weather.
As they move towards the square, we can also see a hyperlane Phoenix, Boston and London. This shows just how much travel has advanced, with people now being able to drive across the planet. As they turn in, we see the Hill Valley sign with Goldie Wilson Jr. now being the mayor. Goldie was someone we met in part 1, with his election bans being about in 1985. The tagline's also back to being a nice place to live, which was what it was during 1955. In the 80s they didn't have that, but this shows how the reputation's been restored. When you think about it, there's really 3 versions of the town, with the first one being the Twin Pines Mall one. This is then altered into the more idyllic one at the end before it's then transformed into the nightmare timeline because of Biff Tannen. Now that second one's what we're witnessing the branch of here, so maybe that's why they included that tagline. Under it, they've also changed your typical warning signs, which normally say stuff like, please drive safely, seatbelts save lives. Here though, nice little joke with them changing it to fly safely and ejection seats save lives. Upon landing, Doc says,
The post office isn't as efficient as the weather service.
which kind of foreshadows the 2 things that affect him throughout the film. Doc is sent back in time by the weather, and he also uses the postal service to send a letter to Marty. Doc then ends up peeling off his skin, which we learn was because of a rejuvenation clinic. This was carried out because of practical reasons, and so that Christopher Lloyd wouldn't have to constantly wear old man makeup. You also see Marty getting some self-lacing Nikes, which the company made for real during 2015. To afford them though, you're gonna need the almanac, cause right now a pair will set you back about 13 grand. The ones from the movie sold for 70 G's. I'm gonna have to do a lot of sponsorship deals to pay for that. At this point, Marty's given a jacket and told to pull his pockets out because that's what all kids do in the future, along with thumbs upping the videos. He's also given a cap and looks almost identical to his son, except for he has blue eyes whereas his sons are brown. Dumping Jennifer, Doc then shows Marty a newspaper, which actually has some really cool little details on it. In the top left, we can see the sports section, and this starts off with a game called Slam Ball. This was originally going to be in the film, but unfortunately they had to cut it due to budgeting reasons. We also see the Cubs sweep the series in 5, which is summing up foreshadows the whole sports almanac thing. Gale put it in as a joke, and though he got that wrong, he did in the end get something right. Gale correctly predicted Miami would have a baseball team by 2015, which is something that shows up in the film. Lastly, on the right hand side, we can see Washington prepares for Queen Diana's visit, as she was of course expected to stay with Charles and rule. As we know, her life was sadly cut short in 1997 during a car crash while she was out in Paris. As Marty pulls it in, we also get a better look at the newsline column, with the first line being about the Thumb Bandits. In the future, you're paid by fingerprint, and they amputated someone's arm in order to get the money. You can also catch one that says Tokyo stocks up, which was put in there due to Japan's strong economy. There's confirmation of a Madame President with a headline saying she's tired, and the USA Today also says it has 3 billion readers, hinting at how much the population's grown. Lastly, we can see in the top right that it costs $6, which is of course due to inflation. The price of things going up was earlier hinted at by Doc, who gives Marty $50 just to buy a Pepsi.
Go in and order a Pepsi. Here's a 50.
Now, the reason Junior is jailed is because lawyers have been abolished in the future, and thus the legal system works a lot quicker. We learn Marty's daughter also tried to bust out her brother, and thus this entire event destroys the whole family. At this point, Marty heads into the square, and we watch as he walks past the re-election posters. These are done in a similar style to how Goldie Sr. had them, showing that it's like father like son. As he walks forward, we can catch a poster on the left before 2 people walk out with a hover surfboard. Later on, we get a better look at this sign and can see it says Surf Vietnam. This was a little nod to Apocalypse Now without ripping off the surfing scenes that happen in that film. We've done a big breakdown on that if you want to check it out, and I think it's one of the best videos on the channel, so do it and tell the people you enjoyed it as well, you better. Anyway, from here, Marty goes to the Holomax, which is showing Jaws 19. This is directed by Max Spielberg, with the tagline being, this time, it's really, really personal. Universal, as much as I slag them off by their copyright strikes, actually put out a really funny trailer in 2015 telling the story of the franchise up until that point.
Jaws made you afraid to go in the water. Jaws 2 made you afraid to go back in the water. Jaws 3D was a new dimension in terror. In Jaws 4: The Revenge, it was personal. Then it was just business. Then pure pleasure. Cyber Jaws made you afraid to log on. And Robo Jaws made you afraid of robotic sharks. Then Chief Brody's grandson assembled a super team of shark hunters. Jaws 10, it was man versus shark versus all the terrors of the deep. Outer space, then a prequel and a sequel to the prequel. And then a new era in terror began. Jaws started a family. Battled a Russian shark named Ivan Sharkovsky, took a bite out of the Big Apple, and learned about love from a mysterious stranger. Jaws 18 Origins, the mind-blowing reboot. Now, the oceans are disappearing, and to save their home, the sharks must attack. Jaws 19. This time, it's really, really personal.
Steven's son Max was born in 1985, with that also being the year that the 80s scenes happened in. Now Back to the Future 2 of course gets referenced in Endgame when Ant-Man calls it a bunch of bullshit. However, beyond that we have a little nod to this scene with the Leviathan that's killed in Tony's snap. One ends up disappearing just before it goes to eat Rocket, with it being shot at the same angle that we get this hologram.
Shark still looks fake.
That line was also not to Spielberg, who was frustrated the shark Bruce looked so fake in Jaws that they had to cut around it. In the end, it made it more terrifying, but that movie was said to be a nightmare to film, and one day I promise that I'll cover it. Either way, Marty also looks up at the Texaco garage, which has been a mainstay in the square. This appeared at the same spot during the 80s and was also there during 1955. At this point, Goldie Jr. pops up advertising the hover conversion ad, which we can see shows a pink car. This ends up driving just under the sign, and we see it for real as it passes by below it. The square also has little time travel jokes, as we can catch a retro store with a clock on the sign to the left of Cafe 80s. Beside the Goldie ad, we can also catch one which I can't quite make out the name, but it says travel under it. Now why I'm pointing this out is because it's in the same spot that Mr. Foster's travel store was at in the 50s, which had the line, time to travel. Marty ends up going to the window of the antique one, and we also get lots of things from the era. There's Jaws 1 and 2 on VHS, as well as a lava lamp and JFK bust. Above that we can also catch Roger Rabbit, with Zemeckis of course directing that movie. The film gets a further reference later on, with the tunnel being the same one that takes you to Toontown. In the top left there's also a denim shirt, which is actually Marty's one from the first film. If you go back to that movie, you can see he has a badge on that says Art and Revolution, which this one also carries. On top of this there's a guitar pin tag, and I'm telling you, it's the bloody same shirt. And Marty did leave it. Is it a jacket? It's a bloody jacket. Either way, Marty did leave it on his bed in the 80s, so hey, maybe this is a carryover from that. Lastly is a JVC camera, and though it's not the same as the one in the first film, Marty did use a camera from the same company. At this point we hit Cafe 80s and catch two guitars on the wall. One of these would later be played by Marty during the scene, after which he gets fired. We also get one of many Michael Jackson references, with the song Beat It playing in the back. As we spin around, we see his likeness is used for the waiter, with Jackson happily handing this over. Jackson was apparently such a big fan of the first film that he was extremely eager to be included in this movie. In the end, they used one of his tribute acts who went by the name E. Casanova. At this point, he was seen as the world's #1 impersonator, so it's a pretty cool inclusion to have him in the film. Later on at the alternate McFly house, his posters lit the room, and I counted 6 things, yes 6 things for him hanging up on the wall. There's the Thriller album cover, which is over a poster of him, and then on the side we've got one for off the wall. On the door is a poster for the Thriller video, and in the mirror we can catch a bigger version of the album cover. Now we also see a Max Headroom style Ronald Reagan, with Reagan of course getting mentioned in the first film. You might also notice there's some moving stars and stripes in the background, which came from the Coca-Cola ad Max Headroom for President. Marty then ends up getting a Pepsi Perfect, with him attempting to order a Pepsi during the 50s. One thing they got right is that on the menu they had the product Pepsi Max, which wouldn't come to be invented until 1993. Anyway, we then cut across to Biff and watch as he stands about the booth. To the left of him we can catch the LA Times, which was reporting on Reagan's second term. Terms later get brought up in the film, as we learn that Richard Nixon's serving a 5th one in the Nightmare timeline. We then get a nod to the first movie, with Biff continuing to berate the McFlys.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Huh? Think, McFly, think.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Huh? Think, McFly. Think.
Until Monday.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Hey, think, McFly. Think.
At this point we then get this.
Hey, Gramps! I told you 2 coats of wax on my car, not just 1.
Calling back to this line from the first film.
Now Biff, I want to make sure that we get 2 coats of wax this time, not just 1.
Don't bloody try and con me, Biff. Anyway, Griff chucks him out, and in the corner we can see the wild gunman. Is that's bloody Elijah Wood, That's Elijah Wood. Now this would be the actor's first role, and both he and Michael J. Fox would end up working together with Peter Jackson. Fox ended up doing The Frighteners, and Wood of course worked on The Lord of the Rings. Marty shows he's a crack shot, and in part 3 he'd end up blasting away with a real gun in the Wild Wild West. Now though Wild Gunman is a real game, there was never an arcade cabinet for it. The graphics we also see were created just for the movie, with the real one looking slightly different. At this point Junior stumbles in, and we get a line that flips things from the first film.
Been Sunday. Oh, McFly, your shoes are tied.
McFly! What? Your shoes unbelt.
Don't be so gullible, McFly. I don't want to see you in here again.
I thought I told you to stay in here.
Here we also meet the girl of the group, Darlene, whose stunt double Cheryl Wheeler Duncan had a nasty accident. In the crash scene, she was supposed to go into the glass, but she ended up smacking into the concrete pillar. Though they cut it just before she drops, you can clearly see her smacking up against it. Cheryl then fell 30 feet and shattered both her wrist and face. Ouch. Now Griff calls Marty a chicken, which makes him turn around, and they kinda use this as a way throughout the films to bait him into doing stuff. To be honest, I always kinda thought it was stupid, but they at least bring it full circle in the third film, when he decides to stop caring, which helps him evade the crash that would have changed his life. Now outside, Marty manages to snatch a hoverboard, which is probably this movie's most iconic piece of tech. This was originally going to be made by Swatch, but Mattel stepped in and secured the deal. Zemeckis had a laugh when promoting the movie, as he said Mattel had made them, but they just hadn't put them into production yet. He said that they managed to secure some for the film, and that they were going to be available very, very soon. Now what a fucking dickhead, mate. I'm bloody furious, and I bet Mattel were too, as they were constantly inundated with calls asking to buy one. For the film though, they were pretty straightforward, with the boards themselves just being planks of wood. Fox had to have his feet harnessed into the board itself, which meant that in the scenes he rides one, he was securely attached. Thus, between takes he had to be carried back and forth, with the board still being stuck there. At the time, it was reported that due to the 4-year gap between films, that Fox had forgotten how to ride one, and that he had to learn how to ride one again. However, Fox has since stated this was an early symptom of his Parkinson's disease, which would later be diagnosed just 2 years later. We also see Griff getting out his, and if you look close, you can see it's called Pitbull. This was originally going to be named Mad Dog after Buford Tannen, but they felt that it was a bit too on the nose. Still though, this scene is brilliant, especially if you've just watched part 1, with it riffing heavily on what happened in that. We even have Marty hitching onto a car, just like how he did in that first film. Causing the gang to crash in the courthouse, the future's changed and Junior is saved. Marty then goes to give the girl the board, but she says that she's now got a pit bull. This is playing off the scene in the first film in which Marty gave a young Tony Hawk, let's call him, his very first skateboard. Now at this point, similar to 1985, we see someone stepping forward to try to get Marty to save the clock tower. Whereas in that, though the ledge was fine, here we can see that it's now missing. This is of course because of Doc Brown's actions, which caused it to fall away in 1955. He also says,
Lightning struck that thing 60 years ago.
Wait a minute.
Now you don't have to have wasted your life being a movie YouTuber to get that one, and at this moment Marty sees the Cubs announcement. He gets the idea from Terry to go back in time and use the sports almanac to make money. Now when looking at Terry here, I always wondered why the makeup was so bad. But right, when digging around, I found out the reason. Turns out there's a deleted scene where Terry argues with Biff about an unpaid car repair bill. Terry said he remembered the exact date he didn't pay him, which was November 12th, 1955. This is what made Biff remember the exact date, so he knew when exactly to travel back to. Biff screwing over Terry would then get a comic response, with him then later crashing into Manure again right after the dance. Anyway, we then cut to the shop and get what turns out to be a pretty important line.
This has an interesting feature. It has a dust jacket.
Later on, the magazine gets confiscated by Strickland, but we learn this is really a Rudy Doody mag. Shoutouts to DBZ Hero 29 on Reddit for pointing out that Biff did this on purpose to mislead anyone that was gonna try and steal it. Outside, Biff then spots a DeLorean and realizes that the one from the 80s and this are the same. We also get this line,
I left him in a suspended animation kennel. Einstein never knew I was gone.
which was just thrown in to fill a plot hole as Doc drove off to the future with Einstein in the car. When he returned home, the dog was missing, so they just put this in to explain why he wasn't there. Anyway, Doc then steps out in a change of clothes, which has some brilliant foreshadowing on it. We can see a steam train from the Wild Wild West and can also catch horses riding alongside it. This is done to foreshadow part 3, in which they hijack one from the Wild West. In what's an amazing bit of attention to detail, we see Doc actually wearing the shirt itself as a bandana in the film when he and Marty hold up the train. As I've been saying, it's all connected, and if you want to support the channel and pick up some of our all connected merch, which you can catch right below the video. Now, Junior is saved with us seeing the US Today camera drone dropping in and taking the photo that appears on the paper itself. Realizing that he's got the almanac, Doc then goes to bin it, which is when we see Jennifer getting picked up. The officer on the right is actually played by Mary Ellen Trainor, who at the time was Zemeckis' real wife. But then preoccupied with that, Biff then puts his plan into action and we catch the police car driving to Hilldale. As they shine the flashlight, it lights up the sign and we can see what the tagline for the area is. It was supposed to be the address of success, but bloody vandals have changed that to suckers. Sort of hints to how Marty's life's turned out, and we learn that the area is a pretty rough neighborhood.
Be careful in the future.
I get it.
Did you get that?
Life hasn't turned out how they expected though, with a pair getting married in a chapel of love. They also have to watch the scenery channel, so the allure of the almanac becomes even more. Michael even ends up playing his daughter, and luckily it's so distracting you don't even realise that that's not Crispin. When Jennifer first comes in, she also says,
Mom? Mom, is that you? I gotta get out of here.
which is the same line spoken by Marty when he wakes up confused about where he is in the first film. In the car, we see as Doc grabs onto his visor and says that he thinks he sees a taxi following. At this point, you can also clearly spot he has 2 wristwatches on, showing how obsessed with time that he is. Back in the house, we learn that Marty busted up the scenery screen after the guy who installed it called him chicken, and we learn how much this word is very triggering for him.
About 30 years ago, your father tried to prove he wasn't chicken, and he ended up in an automobile accident.
Oh, you mean with the Rolls Royce?
This Rolls Royce pops up at the end of part 3 and shows how he narrowly managed to avoid that path. Now when Junior returns home, we see how he turns on some channels, and in the top right we can see one for breast implants. Potentially this is foreshadowing what Lorraine would be forced into, and she ends up getting them in the home. We see how he turns on some channels, and in the top right we can see one for breast implants. Potentially this is foreshadowing what Lorraine would be forced into, and she ends up getting them in the alternate timeline. This timeline then gets created when we watch Biff taking the DeLorean. Biff doing this is given away when we see the inside of the car later on, as we can catch the date last visited on the bottom line. Had they picked up on this, then they'd have realised someone else had been in the car and instantly figure out exactly what had happened. Back in the house, we see them cooking a pizza, which has the Pizza Hut logo on the front of the packet. Now, according to IMDb Trivia, Pizza Hut wanted the brand to look good, so they provided a professional food stylist for each and every take. They also installed a proper pizza kitchen at the south and made up new ones for every single shot. At this point, he's egged on by Needles, who's played by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This is immediately caught by the boss, and he's fired on the spot. Now, there's a little detail that gives away Needles was in on it, as we can catch him looking off as the call ends, which is likely to the boss. McFly's boss is also Japanese, which was due to the country's dominance when it came to industry. This was in a time in which lots of our items were made in Japan, and both this and Blade Runner predicted them being world leaders in technology. I think at the heart of this though is that it hammers home the message of the movie, which is about the dangers of trying to get rich quick. Marty Jr. is arrested because he goes in on the scheme, and Marty of course tries to grab the almanac. Here we also see him getting roped into doing it again, and all of the outcomes just lead to disaster. Jennifer then encounters herself. We see as Biff rolls in, and in a nice bit of attention to detail, you can catch ice coming off the top of the car like how it did in part 1. Doc also foreshadows his actions in the future as he talks about going back to the Old West.
My only regret is I'll never get a chance to visit my favorite historical era, the Old West.
He says this is to study the greatest mystery in the universe, women, with that basically being what his arc centers around in part 3. We can also catch Biff thrashing away, which is of course because he got erased from time. Now because of this, people have wondered why that Biff's still not around. Technically, he would still exist after the time change, he'd just be different to the old man that he was here. Galen Zemeckis actually put things in place to clear this up, and they were going to reveal something in an earlier draft. We would learn that Lorraine shot Biff in '96, which explained why the Biff years started to vanish, like my subscribers now that comic book movies aren't popular. Returning back to 1985, there is a couple of signs straight away that something's amiss. As they pull in, we can see a battered car in a driveway and trash piling out of every bin. As they go to drop Jennifer off, we can also see a total car on hers with bars on the windows. Now, what I love, well, I shouldn't say love, what I find funny is that they just drop Jennifer off on her porch, leave her there and say, if we sort stuff out, it'll be fine, mate. No need to worry about Jennifer, just leave her on the porch in hell and go change the timeline, and in the end, it'll just work itself out. Like, come on, mate, I don't know if that would be the case, and I would have found it hilarious if they got Claudia Wells back to show up in part 3 like nothing was wrong. But alas, they don't do that, and they just dump her in the bad timeline. We then cut over to Lyden Estate, which is filled with graffiti and stray dogs. We can also catch multiple for sale signs outside every house, and it looks like these belong to Biff. Though they're difficult to make out, that does look like his logo, and Marty's the only one without a sign outside of it.
Right, you keep running, sucker! And you tell that realty company that I ain't selling, you hear?
Thus this makes sense with Biff taking over the town. I feel like the family scene is kind of playing off the Peabody scene, in which he gets chased into the night. He ends up making it out to Strickland's, who holds him up at gunpoint, and in the end we discover the school burned down. In the 4K version, you can make out there's a scar over his eyes, and then his house is shut up, showing what Biff's leadership's like. Hill Valley has become Hell Valley, and we once more get a return of Red Thomas.
Crazy drunk driver.
Watch where you're going! Crazy drunk pedestrian!
In case you missed our last video, Red was the mayor in 1955 who ended up homeless after losing his job. The clock tower has now been turned into a monument to Biff, but hey, at least he fixed the ledge. Still though, the strip clubs are in full effect, tanks roam the street, and we discover that smoking's required if you want to go inside. Seeing his black car outside the hotel, we then learn of Biff's life since the timeline change. We also get a moment showing Buford Tannen setting up the third film's villain. He ends up looking a bit different how he does in part 3, with this being an early makeup test. Dubbed the luckiest man on earth, he's used his fortune to legalize gambling, and in the end has managed to build an empire. Dating Marilyn Monroe, he ended up marrying his high school sweetheart, which even old Biff still had his eye on.
Hey kid, say hello to your grandma for me.
Say hi to your mom for me.
Grabbed by matches, 3D, and the other one, we then see as Marty's escorted upstairs. You can catch that 3D is once more wearing 3D glasses, but in the 50s these were made of card. Man's now going up in the world though, as he has proper frames for this, and Match also still has this match in his mouth, and we then get this bit.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way.
Always kind of made me wonder who was saying the easy way, but shoutouts to Niles7658 on Reddit for pointing this out. If you speed up the easy way bit, you can actually hear it's Michael J. Fox.
The easy way.
Also, I love how the easy way is just knocking him out, because in the world of Biff, the hard way ain't good. Waking up in bed with his mother at his side, the scene of course riffs on the one from the first film with her nursing him awake. Sat up in bed, I love how most of the actions play off that scene, with Lorraine now being scared of Biff instead of fearing her mother.
Oh my god, it's your father!
Lorraine, are you up there?
Oh my god, it's my mother!
Living in what's got the decor of Scarface's mansion, we see Lorraine stumble over to a lot of bottles. Beside this, we can catch a tape called Black Taboo, which was an adult movie that was about incest. I don't know why all these movies have something like that, but here we are.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Now we discover that, though Lorraine wants to go, Biff's bankrolling her kids. This includes Linda, who was originally going to be a lady of the night. However, Wendy Jo Sperber was pregnant at the time, so they thought the optics of that, it might be a bit bad. You're better off just sticking with incest, mate. That's much better. Either way, Joey is mentioned as being behind bars, with this also being a carryover from the first film. In the end, Marty finds out his dad's dead, and we see as he goes to visit his grave. This lists his date of birth as April 1st, giving an idea that his life was a joke. You might also notice that he died on the Ides of March, which is known as a day in which you settle debts. Smart. We can also see the factories behind Marty burning in the back, showing how Biff turned it into an industrial wasteland. Joined by Doc, we see a newspaper chronicling his death and get some hints as to what the world's like. There's a standoff with some Native Americans, which was put in place to foreshadow Marty coming across them during part 3. You also see a bit about the Watergate revelations, which in the end changed the fate of Nixon. On the left, we can see that there's a strike with oil workers and a record number of new claims for unemployment filed. The main page becomes important as, like the photograph, it shows when the future's been changed. Doc then shows that in this reality he's been committed, which was something that was foreshadowed earlier in the film.
Changes over the years, they simply assume she's the Jennifer of the future. Oh, we gotta stop him. What are we gonna say? That we're time travelers? They have us committed.
I know you can also take it as Biff getting him out of the way, but I just thought that it was interesting that they had this line earlier. Either way, Marty flips the paper around, we get Nixon, and a headline about how there's a pollution alert in Hill Valley. Lastly, if you check out the bottom one, you'll see that Biff Co. has taken over Lone Pine Mall. That's Lone Pine because the events of the first film still happen, with George beating Biff up at the end. This is why Lorraine said Biff would never be the man George was, because she'd known him in his more heroic incarnation. It also explains why he had him killed, because George had been the one standing up to him. Returning to Biff's, we then get this line,
How'd you get past my security downstairs?
and as we see, Marty came in the DeLorean, explaining how he managed to make it past. They bring up the lightning strike, the car getting rolled in manure, and also the crazy man that showed up with the book. Marty also grabs some matches before things lead into Biff blowing off his gun. Racing downstairs, I always appreciated how slick it was with Marty jumping across staircases in order to escape. Getting to the roof, he manages to make it out, with the DeLorean being held in the air through using fiber wire so that it appeared invisible. Back in the DeLorean, we see the time circuit display flash.
I think I'm about to end stream, so if anybody in here wants to say bye, now is the time.
Park the car where the original DeLorean was hidden. At this point, though, the older version was moved to the lab, explaining why this spot is now vacant. We also get a repeat of the blocking that was used in part 1, with one character running close to the camera while the other one runs into the background. Opening up a suitcase full of money, we can also see Doc has cash from different eras. When I paused this, I was wondering why there were 2 bills for 1864, and not being up on my American history, I did a little Google search. So turns out, this is actually due to the Civil War, which had 2 types of currency out in circulation. Really nice attention to detail, with it showing how prepared that Doc is. At Biff Grandma's Gertrude Channing, we also hear Thomas F. Wilson providing her voice.
Where are you going, Biff? I'm going to get my car, Grandma. When are you coming back?
Cutting to the town square from the 50s, we see Terry with Biff arguing over the money. Again, this would have made more sense with the deleted scene and explain all that terrible old man makeup. Biff also says that only he knows how to start that car, which is something older Biff later does to get him into trusting him. At this point, Biff spots Lorraine, who we see excited over a new dress. This was something that was also a bit of a nightmare because the crew had gotten rid of most of the clothes from the first film. This of course included Lorraine's dresses, namely the spare ones they kept in case one got damaged. However, Leah Thompson revealed that she'd kept one and actually had to drive home to get it for the shoot. Biff declares his love for Lorraine. She says she wouldn't date him even if he had $1 million, and you can see how those lines play off down the line. And from here, Biff's taken to the garage in which he interacts with his other self. These scenes were shot using the Vista Glide, which at the time was completely groundbreaking. It allowed actors to play multiple parts in the same scene and have them all blend together seamlessly, bar a few little moments. Earlier in the movie at the McFlys, we had Fox playing 3 different characters in one scene, which was the first time it had ever been pulled off in a film. That shot was divided into 3 parts, whereas here they used the middle of the windscreen to help mask the coverage. Biff then says,
Now why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
It's leave, you idiot. Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong.
Also, once Biff correctly shows the results, we can see as the older one starts to disappear. As he hands over the book at roughly the 1:09 mark, you can see his arm starts to fade away. This is similar to how Marty's hand did in the first film, showing how things have now been changed. This was then going to be expanded on in a deleted scene where we'd see Biff completely disappear.
Alright friends, good night.
Writhing around in pain, but that shows him completely fading